Chapter 2665. A ruined world. The spatial tunnel appeared to be a huge, colorful gate from the outside, but it seemed like a long corridor inside. However, there was no peace inside the corridor. Time distorted as space collided and folded. Violent energy ran amok as well. The entire spatial tunnel seemed like the surging seas, without a single inch of peace. Moreover, the energy there was so chaotic that it could not be absorbed. Apart from the laws of space and the laws of time, there were no other laws present. Hence, regardless of how powerful a cultivator was, only those who had comprehended the laws of space or the laws of time would be able to use their power of laws in the tunnel. Even Grand Primes were not an exception. Anyone within the tunnel could only use the power of their cultivation. After the heartless child entered the tunnel, he did not use even a single sliver of his power of laws anymore. The power of his supreme cultivation erupted from his body, forming a powerful barrier of light around him. Jian Chen was naturally protected as well. As a result, the spatial tunnel that should have been perilous to various primordial realm experts and spaceships, requiring the utmost caution, was suppressed by the heartless child's cultivation. It became as simple as a stroll for them to move through it. They moved extremely quickly as well, basically rushing through the entire place like a comet. They overtook the spaceships that moved carefully through the tunnel as they smashed through all the streams of energy there. What a powerful cultivation and what great speed! Who is this person? Even mid-Grand Primes would never dare to move through here like that. Who in the world is he? How is his cultivation so terrifying? Gasps and sighs rang out from the spaceships that the heartless child overtook. The experts who witnessed this all were shocked. It was impossible to sense the flow of time inside the spatial tunnel, so after who knows how long, Jian Chen and the heartless child finally emerged, arriving in a region of pitch-black space. The space was barren. There was no starlight at all. Only a colorful spatial tunnel hung there quietly, as well as many spaceships parked nearby. It seemed exactly the same as the Saint's world. There was nothing different as far as the eye could see. However, Jian Chen could clearly sense the difference. The most obvious differences were the energy of the world and the laws of the world. The energy of the world in the space here clearly differed from the Saint's world. A person from the Saint's world probably could not absorb the energy of the world here to cultivate. Even if they could, it would definitely be an arduous task. As for the laws of the world, they felt like they were in ruins. The 3,000 laws were incomplete. Even the laws that did exist felt like someone had severed them with a knife. They were not whole. In short, it was basically impossible to achieve much at all when cultivating under such conditions. The incomplete laws made it dozens of times or even over 100 times more difficult for cultivators of this world to comprehend. There were even some laws that could not be comprehended. Is this the spirit's world? Jian Chen studied the surroundings as he thought to himself. The heartless child studied the world with a frown before handing a jade slip to Jian Chen. He said, "I'll just leave you here. The entrance to the world of the fallen beast isn't far. It won't take long for you to get there with your speed. This is the precise location of the world of the fallen beast." The heartless child seemed to dislike this place very much. After handing over that, he turned around and left, returning to the spatial tunnel to go back to the Saint's world. Jian Chen was in no hurry to leave after the heartless child's departure. Instead, he picked up the jade slip from the heartless child and studied it carefully. At this moment, a spaceship shot out from the spatial tunnel behind him. Just when the spaceship was about to accelerate, it suddenly stopped. An old man with gray hair flew out from the spaceship and arrived before Jian Chen with a smile. "I am Anlu Defu from the Anlu clan of the Westlan Plain." "Greetings." The old man clasped his fist at Jian Chen and said extremely politely. Jian Chen stowed away the jade slip from the heartless child. He looked at the old man. The old man did not hide his presence, so Jian Chen immediately sensed his cultivation. He was a chaotic prime and not much weaker than Su Ran. He was at the third heavenly layer. "I am Changyang Shangtian." "Greetings, senior." Jian Chen clearly returned his politeness, responding with a clasped fist as well. "So it's Changyang Shangtian. It's a pleasure to meet you. I was wondering if you have time to spare?" I would like to invite you to our spaceship, said Onludafu. Jianchen immediately understood. Onludafu clearly saw the heartless child move through the spatial tunnel with him, so he misunderstood him as someone with the backing of an extremely powerful expert. As such, he wanted to rope him in. Due to the special circumstances of the spatial tunnel, the heartless child was unable to cross through it in an instant. He had overtaken many spaceships along the way, so he obviously attracted all of their attention. Jianchen was worried about Sacred Feather's safety, so he only wanted to arrive at the world of the fallen beast sooner. He obviously was in no mood to waste time here, so he declined politely. At the same time, a few more spaceships emerged from the spatial tunnel. When the experts on them discovered Jianchen, they all flew out from their spaceships like Onludafu to greet Jianchen. They were all extremely friendly and were ready to curry up to Jianchen. Even if they could not rope him in, they wanted to get to know him. After all, they had all witnessed the heartless child's strength. Even though they were nowhere close to seeing through the heartless child's cultivation, just the tremendous pressure from him and how he moved through the spatial tunnel fearlessly was enough to let them understand that he had surpassed their ancestors. They obviously did not want to give up on even the slightest chance to befriend someone like that. If they managed to establish something between them, they would have achieved something major. It would hold great significance for their clans. Jianchen understood that the more time he wasted, the more trouble he would be in when the spaceships behind emerged. As a result, he turned them all down and left without any hesitation. The jade slip from the heartless child clearly depicted the direction and path. It went into great detail, describing the most effortless way to travel and the safest path to take. As a result, it was quite difficult for Jianchen to get lost here. Chapter 2666. A message from the Protector Swords. Jianchen used the laws of space to cover ground in outer space. He moved like the heartless child, where every single step he took touched on the profound truths of the universe, allowing him to teleport. Who knows how far he could cross in an instant? Due to being too great of a world, it was impossible for people to teleport like they did in lower worlds in the Saints' world without exceptional cultivation or extremely great comprehension of the laws of space. After Jianchen's comprehension of the laws of space reached infinite prime, he was finally able to achieve this. However, even with that being the case, the distance he could teleport each time was extremely limited. It was unlike the Tianyuan continent, where Saint Kings could rip open space gates and go wherever they wanted. The space in the spirit's world is rather different from the saint's world. Perhaps due to the incomplete laws of space here, I always feel like it's rather arduous to use the laws of space here. It's not as easy as back in the saint's world. Jianchen stopped very quickly. He studied the space there with his brows furrowed, and then he silently sensed the power of his soul. His eyebrows became even more furrowed. When I use the laws, the power of my soul is drained faster, and the recovery speed is less than a third of the speed in the saint's world. I can't keep using the laws of space to cover ground. It looks like whatever I do in this place, I need to save energy, thought Jianchen. No wonder the heartless child had turned around and left as soon as he arrived here. The environment was so terrible that even an expert like the heartless child would be affected. Jianchen gave up on using the laws of space to cover ground. With a thought, chaotic force began to circulate in his body rapidly, allowing him to travel quickly using his cultivation alone. Chaotic force grew at an extremely gradual rate because it was just too powerful. A tremendous amount of energy was required to condense every strand, so the energy in each strand was obviously immense. As a result, his chaotic force depleted extremely slowly as well. In this foreign land, other cultivators would probably conserve the power of their cultivation due to the difficulty of absorbing origin energy here, but Jianchen had no need to worry about that at all. His chaotic Niden contained an almost endless amount of energy. It was enough for him to do whatever he wanted in this foreign and incomplete world. At the same time, there was a certain region within the Saints' world filled with floating, shattered meteors. They varied in size and basically packed the entire place. The fragments of meteor did not directly disintegrate when struck by violent pulses of energy. Instead, they shot off like comets into the depths of the sea of stars, propelled by the powerful energy. At the very center of this space was an extremely large, almost planet-like space beast. The pressure it gave off made the space there tremble and distort. It was extremely terrifying and powerful. The vital energy it possessed was earth-shaking. An elephant-shaped space beast constantly raised its foot and stamped down at a ball of white light that seemed even smaller than an ant in comparison. The ball of white light was Gong Sun-ji, who had been sent there by the rain abyss through her laws of space. He had already become sheet-white, and his eyes were filled with despair. There was a sense of dread towards death. He had been trapped there by the space beast through extremely great energy, forcing him to endure this terrifying attack at all times. As the protective light from Godslayer's sword was rapidly drained away, it clearly became thinner and thinner. This made Gong Sun-ji feel the same powerlessness as when he faced the rain abyss. Although he was protected by the protector sword, making him temporarily safe, the protector sword's energy would eventually run out. He could only watch the light around him grow thinner and thinner. He could not do anything else. He could only wait for death quietly. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I only just got the position of leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. I've yet to enjoy the wealth and status properly. I've yet to conquer the entire desolate plain and become a supreme figure on there. I can't die here. Gong Sun-ji's voice trembled. The fear of death filled his heart, making his legs shake. He could vaguely sense that the space beast was even more terrifying than the rain abyss. The rain abyss had used her mastery over the laws of space to send Gong Sun-ji here with great precision. This was clearly no coincidence. The rain abyss knew that this would happen. At the same time, Godslayer's sword let out a thrum. It was gentle, but it was enough to even reach the depths of hell. It seemed to be sobbing, not because it was not powerful enough, but because its wielder was too weak, unable to unleash its power. It could only defend reactively against the space beast. Within the Radiant Saint Hall on the desolate plain, one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, Xian Zhan, current sat within a secret room as he cultivated. The laws of the hallowed gathered around him like a web, revolving around him with the profound truths of the world. He clearly was making the final preparations for the most crucial step to breaking through. Once he broke through successfully and reached Grand Prime, he would be able to unleash even greater power from his protector sword. Suddenly, Xian Zhan stopped. He opened his eyes, and a gleam of light flashed through them. He closed his hand, and a large sword immediately appeared in his hand. The sword was surrounded by a brilliant light such that only an outline would be visible from time to time. This was the 9th Protector's sword, Mindwaker's sword. The Protector's sword sent a message. Gong Sun-ji is in danger, and it actually wants me to go save him, Xian Zhan murmured before leaving the secret room. At the same time, Xian Ming, who cultivated in another room within the sacred hall, and Han Xian and Bai Yu on the soaring clouds peak roused from cultivation. They drew their protector swords immediately and sensed the message from the sword. Gong Sun-ji is in danger, and it actually wants us to save him. I'll never go. I hate him the most. It's best if he dies. Bai Yu stamped her foot and pouted. She was completely reluctant. She felt disgusted as soon as she thought of Gong Sun-ji's face and actions. She even hoped that Gong Sun-ji would die sooner. Bai Yu, let's go. Get ready to set off. This is the will of the protector swords. We cannot defy them. Han Xian flew down from the top of the mountain and appeared before Bai Yu. His appearance had not changed at all from before, but his bearing was different. He seemed like a completely different person. Not only did it become even more steady, it was even filled with a great sense of confidence. This was what the protector sword had brought. To them, the protector swords represented great strength. With great strength and a unique status in the Radiant Saint Hall, Han Xian's confidence would obviously differ from before. But, Bai Yu remained reluctant, but she understood that since the protector sword had brought this message, she had no other choice even if she did not want to. If she did not abide by the protector sword's will, it was extremely likely for the protector sword to leave her. Chapter 2667. Condescension. After all, they were only wielders of the protector swords. They were not their masters. The protector swords could leave them at any time, with that being the case. Of course, it was extremely unlikely for the protector swords to give them messages. Only when other wielders were under threat or the other protector swords were in danger would they give a warning. If that bastard Gongsun Ji died, the Radiant Saint Hall would gain quite a lot of peace. Why do the protector swords want us to save him? Donglin Yanxue also felt extremely vexed. Currently, she was within the Donglin clan. She clearly loathed Gongsun Ji the most, yet she was told to save him. It made her very conflicted. In the end, the 5 protectors gathered together. They all followed the directions of their protector swords and arrived in the space where Gongsun Ji was trapped. Gongsun Ji was in an exceedingly distant region of space. They had to cross over a dozen planes with teleportation formations first before crossing who knows how great of a distance using the power of the protector swords. Only then did they arrive. This was the first time the 6 protector swords had gathered in outer space, somewhere beyond the desolate plain. However, when they saw the colossal space beast, everyone was shocked aside from Xianzhan. This was the first time the 4 of them had ever seen such a gigantic space beast. Naturally, they could not avoid a startling battle. With their arrival, Gongsun Ji was saved as well. Fantastic! Vice Leader Xianzhan, you've finally come to support me. I've already been locked in combat against this space beast for many days. It's running out of strength. Quick, let's work together and kill it. Gongsun Ji laughed aloud. Their arrival made him relax completely. Different to his prior despair, he was now in high spirit. His confidence swelled. He knew that he would not die to the foot of the terrifying space beast with their arrival. Afterwards, Gongsun Ji went from defending reactively to attacking proactively. He worked with Xianzhan and the others to fight the space beast. The 6 protector swords of the Radiant Saint Hall all shone brightly, illuminating the dark space there. They became embroiled in an astonishing battle. However, the space beast was just too powerful. Moreover, the toughness of its body was almost unmatched. After a few clashes, they discovered to their shock that aside from Xianzhan, none of them could harm the space beast at all. Even Xianzhan could only inflict some mild injuries to the space beast. However, the attack from the space beast would launch them far away every time. Even with the protection of the protector swords, it was a terrible feeling. Let's retreat. There's nothing we can do about it, said Xianzhan. Are we just going to let it go like this? Gongsun Ji felt aggrieved. He had been harassed by the space beast for such a long time, where his life had almost been in danger. He had finally found an opportunity for revenge, only to discover there was nothing he could do about it. This matter filled him with resentment. Xianzhan stared at Gongsun Ji emotionlessly and said, "If you want revenge, you can stay behind yourself. We won't be accompanying you." As Gongsun Ji had forced Yuchen to step down, making him leave the Radiant Saint Hall, Xianzhan did not have any good impression of Gongsun Ji at all. His words were without mercy, taking no regard of Gongsun Ji's identity as the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Indeed, there was nothing Gongsun Ji could do to Xianzhan. At the very least, he did not have the confidence to stand up to Xianzhan now that he faced the threat of the space beast. As a result, he could only snort coldly inside. He shot a glance at the space beast that had caused him great distress reluctantly before turning around and leaving. In the end, Xianzhan covered for them, and they left successfully. Almost as soon as Gongsun Ji returned to the Radiant Saint Hall, Huang Fugi of the Midheaven clan and Su Zhiping of the Su family went to find him. They hoped for Gongsun Ji to fulfill his end of the deal sooner, allowing a junior from their respective clans to inherit a protector sword. Both of them had dragged themselves over with heavily injured bodies. They had suffered bad wounds in the battle against the martial soul lineage and the Rain Abyss. It would be almost impossible for them to recover in a short amount of time. However, they did not care about their wounds at all. They only thought about the protector swords of the Radiant Saint Hall. They wanted the protector swords to end up in the hands of their juniors sooner so that they could consolidate their clan's strength and status. The martial soul lineage hasn't been destroyed. Not a single one of them died as a matter of fact. The method of the exalted saint I want hasn't been retrieved from Jianchen either. You failed to achieve anything from the visit to the cloud plane, yet you still have the face to ask me for protector swords? Piss off, Both of you, piss off. As soon as he returned to the Radiant Saint Hall, Gong Sunji's arrogance swelled once more. The presence of the protectors had given him the confidence to look down on all. Coupled with how furious he felt, he immediately began to curse Huang Fuji and Su Zhiping. He did not care about their dignity at all. Su Zhiping and Huang Fuji were rather dumbstruck when Gong Sunji cursed them. They were mighty fourth heavenly layer grand primes, worthy of such respect on the desolate plain. They could affect the entire plain with a wave of their hand, yet they had now been cursed by Gong Sunji, who never took them seriously. Perhaps this was the first time something like this had happened within the countless years they had been cultivating. However, Su Zhiping and Huang Fuji returned to their senses very soon. Their faces were completely sunken as an indetectable sliver of viciousness flashed through the depths of their eyes. Clearly, they had been completely infuriated. However, they showed none of it. On the current desolate plain, their Mid-Heaven clan and Su family were the closest to Gong Sunji. It had been very difficult for them to establish this relationship. Before they obtained the protector swords, they did not wish to fall out with Gong Sunji. Let's just endure it for now. Do it for the sake of the bigger picture. He won't be able to last very long with how arrogant he is. Once the protector sword abandons him, he'll only be an ant. Huang Fuji said to Su Zhiping secretly. It's infuriating. Gong Sunji is just too conceited. He's far too condescending. Once the protector swords end up in the hands of our clans, we'll form an alliance with Xianzhan immediately and show Gong Sunji what's what. Su Zhiping replied secretly as well. He was fuming. Gong Sunji's merciless words had infringed on Su Zhiping and Huang Fuji's dignity. Although they were furious, neither Su Zhiping nor Huang Fuji openly retorted Gong Sunji. You can't blame us for this. You witnessed the Rain Abbess' strength as well. She wanted to protect the martial soul lineage, so there's nothing we can do either. Moreover, even Sha Yun died because of that, said Huang Fuji. Su Zhiping snorted coldly. You need to find a way to deal with the Rain Abbess if you want to destroy the martial soul lineage. With the Rain Abbess' strength, probably only the Celestial Sword Saint can match her on the desolate plain. If you have the ability, go get the Celestial Sword Saint to take part. Chapter 2668, Unworthy, the Celestial Sword Saint? Gong Sunji's eyes suddenly lit up when they mentioned that name. He did not know the Celestial Sword Saint's cultivation, but the Celestial Sword Saint was the undisputed greatest cultivator on the desolate plain. He cultivated reclusively in the Sword God Mountains all year round, never paying attention to the matters around him, nor interfering in any of them. He was an extremely aloof figure. Su Zhiping's words were seemingly enlightening. It allowed countless thoughts to flood Gong Sunji's head in an instant, giving him an idea immediately. The Celestial Sword Saint holds a very great status, but I am no longer the mere God King from the past. I am a Grand Exalt's descendant. The blood of a Grand Exalt courses through my veins. I'm also the master of the greatest protector sword, Godslayer's sword, as well as the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. The Celestial Sword Saint will definitely treat me with importance given that, thought Gong Sunji. It opened his mind to many new ideas. The morning of the next day, Gong Sunji prepared a few lavish gifts and created quite a scene by visiting the Celestial Sword Saint with the vice leaders and some elders of the Radiant Saint Hall loyal to him. He managed to meet the Celestial Sword Saint as he wished. The Celestial Sword Saint currently sat on the edge of a cliff at the top of the Sword God Mountains like an old, meditating monk. He did not give off any presence at all. As he sat there with his straight back, he seemed like a normal, healthy, old man. Gong Sunji was rather excited as he stood behind the Celestial Sword Saint. In the past, the Celestial Sword Saint had always been a figure of legends to him. Not only did he seem insurmountable, but even just catching a glimpse of him was a dream for Gong Sunji. Now, he was so close to the Celestial Sword Saint. A legend was presented right before him like this, so it was difficult for him to not become emotional. The Celestial Sword Saint spoke first. He said completely calmly and emotionlessly, Gong Sunji, I know why you've come. You want me to deal with the Rain Abbess of the Delight Plain. Senior Sword Saint really does have divine foresight, never leaving the Sword God Mountains but knowing everything that happens in the world. Senior's level of cultivation is truly admirable. Gongsun Ji expressed his admiration from the bottom of his heart. He was arrogant, but he still felt admiration towards the Celestial Sword Saint from the bottom of his heart. Not only was the Celestial Sword Saint the undisputed greatest expert of the desolate plain, but his prestige on the plain had reached an unmatched level as well. He was supreme. In other words, all cultivators on the desolate plain who knew the Celestial Sword Saint would revere him. I cannot assist you in that. I must tell you that the Rain Abbess is much stronger than you have imagined her to be. It's best if your Radiant Saint Hall does not provoke her, the Celestial Sword Saint continued. He seemed to know everything, refusing Gongsun Ji's request before he could even mention it. Gongsun Ji was stunned. He had never thought that the Celestial Sword Saint would turn him down before he could even mention the matter. Moreover, he declined in such an absolute fashion, leaving no room for negotiation. Gongsun Ji became rather speechless at that moment. All the methods of insistence he had prepared beforehand had been rendered useless by the Celestial Sword Saint's simple reply. Only after quite a daze did Gongsun Ji force out, "Celestial Sword Saint, are you afraid of the Rain Abbess? I've only told you that because of Godslayer's sword in your hands. You will gain no benefits from offending the Rain Abbess of the Delight Plain. That's all I have to say. Take care." The Celestial Sword Saint did not waver at all. He remained seated there like an unmoving rock. Only his old voice boomed out. He did not even glance at Gongsun Ji, as if he did not take Gongsun Ji seriously at all. It was like he had only seen Gongsun Ji because of Godslayer's sword. The Celestial Sword Saint's straightforward reply became offending in Gongsun Ji's ears. He felt like he was being belittled. Who is Gongsun Ji? He was the mighty descendant of a Grand Exalt, the youngest leader in the Radiant Saint Hall's history, and the wielder of the greatest protector sword, Godslayer's sword. All of these aspects made Gongsun Ji extremely confident and arrogant. He would not allow anyone to belittle him. He respected the Celestial Sword Saint very much, but the Celestial Sword Saint's words had infuriated him. "Celestial Sword Saint, I respect you because you are my senior. However, don't take it too far. You may be scared of the Rain Abbess, but I'm not. Godslayer's sword may not be able to take the Rain Abbess life, but I refuse to believe that I can't deal with the Rain Abbess if there's the Tower of Radiance as well. Don't forget, I am the Grand Exalt's descendant. The Tower of Radiance came from my ancestor, so I am the only one who can inherit it. The Tower of Radiance will accept me as its master sooner or later." As if someone had stepped on Gongsun Ji's toes, he snarled at the Celestial Sword Saint furiously. "No, you're wrong. You won't obtain the Tower of Radiance," said the Celestial Sword Saint. "What? Did you just say that I won't obtain the Tower of Radiance?" "Ha!" Gongsun Ji laughed out of anger. He boasted shamelessly, "Across the world, no one is more worthy of obtaining my ancestor's Tower of Radiance than me. The Tower of Radiance is no ordinary god artifact, nor is it like the protector swords of your Radiant Saint Hall. It is a supreme treasure personally forged by a Grand Exalt. You must fulfill some natural conditions to gain its recognition. Unfortunately, you have not, which is why there is no chance for you to become its master," said the Celestial Sword Saint. "Celestial Sword Saint, don't talk nonsense. The Tower of Radiance is the supreme treasure of our Radiant Saint Hall. No one understands it better than our Radiant Saint Hall. How would you know what we don't?" Gongsun Ji barked. His heart had already been set alit with fury. If it were not for the fact that the person before him held supreme prestige on the desolate plain, he would have swung Godslayer's sword at him already. He treated the Tower of Radiance with absolute importance, even more than Godslayer's sword in his hands, and this was all because it was a treasure on the levels of Grand Exalts. As long as he possessed the Tower of Radiance, basically no one could harm him apart from Grand Exalts. As a result, he could not accept others saying that he was unworthy of the Tower of Radiance. That touched on a soft spot of his. In the end, Gongsun Ji failed to get the Celestial Sword Saint to take part. He left the Sword God Mountains with a sunken face. After Gong Sun Ji left, the celestial sword saint slowly opened his eyes. He stared at the radiant Saint Hall with a deep gaze. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the formations around the radiant Saint Hall, directly locking onto the sacred hall floating above the clouds. He murmured, "Jian Chen really is someone that cannot be seen through. However, if he still doesn't appear, the Tower of Radiance will probably become the Tower of Radiance of the past." Chapter 2669. The Star Source Continent. Jian Chen did not use any power of laws in the spirit's world. He completely relied on chaotic force to advance through space. Even though he did not use the laws of space, he was as fast as regular spaceships. He flew for 3 whole days in outer space before finally seeing some scattered starlight, as well as swathes of floating meteors. He had left the empty space now and arrived in the sea of stars. However, the damage the spirit's world had suffered was even more evident here. Huge cracks hung about everywhere, sucking in all light. The cracks did not close up automatically like in the saint's world. They were like ghastly wounds, existing there forever. They would not vanish, nor would they close up. They would only grow larger and larger as they received more damage with time, increasing in number. Jian Chen also saw regions of collapsed space. The laws there were damaged, and the elements of the world were incomplete. They gave off a sense of destruction, which could strike fear within the hearts of people. In short, basically most of the space Jian Chen saw was in shambles. There were very few places that were complete. Even when he flew through space, he needed to be careful. Who knows what would happen if he fell into one of them? After another day of flying, Jian Chen finally arrived at his destination, a damaged piece of land that was floating in outer space. The Heartless Child's jade slip possessed information on this piece of land. It was one of the 5 sacred lands of the spirit's world, the Star Source Continent. These sacred lands were the few larger and safer pieces of land that managed to survive after the spirit's world fell into shambles. These fragments of land were the few remaining places where people could cultivate, which was why they became the 5 sacred lands of the spirit's world. Even with that being the case, the 5 sacred lands were not large. The Star Source Continent before Jian Chen was only half the size of the Cloud Plain. The Star Source Continent was enveloped by a powerful formation. The formation was like a transparent barrier, wrapping around the entirety of the continent. It only left a single place for entry and exit. Over 10,000 armored soldiers were stationed at the entrances. They collected so-called dwelling expenses from every single person that entered the Star Source Continent. There was a long-range teleportation formation on the Star Source Continent, which could allow Jian Chen to reach the world of the fallen beast as quickly as possible. As a result, this was his destination. Even from afar, it was possible to see many spaceships of various sizes and shapes parking at the entrance of the Star Source Continent. Cultivators disembarked from their spaceships either in long groups or under the lead of their seniors. They made their way towards one of the entrances. There was only one place for entry, but there were over a dozen tunnels constructed there in total. Most of them were closed off. Only a few were open. Jian Chen did not want to raise much attention, so he hid his presence. He slowed down and approached the entrance. However, when the cultivators who waited in the long queue saw how Jian Chen had actually flown over through outer space alone, they all looked at him with strange gazes. They were surprised. Jian Chen clearly noticed the attention he was receiving, which made him frown a little. He did not know which part of him stood out, but he did not think too much of it either. Instead, he looked at a huge board floating in outer space. The board recorded the origins of the Star Source Continent, as well as some information and rules regarding it. The rules of the Star Source Continent were very straightforward. As a matter of fact, it could even be regarded as a lawless place. Basically, it just explained how strength reigned supreme, where experts could do whatever they wanted. This was all because there were formations personally cast down by a Grand Exalt in the depths of the continent. As a result, it was so tough that it could endure any attacks from those below Grand Exalt. Hence, there was no need to worry about the Star Source Continent being damaged by fights between experts. Moreover, whether it be staying or cultivating on the Star Source Continent, it was nowhere near as relaxed as in the Saint's world. The spirit's world was already ruined, so there were extremely few places that could inhabit people. Not only did it make every inch of the place precious, but staying on the Star Source continent required a daily fee of 100 supreme-grade divine crystals as well. This was quite the price to most cultivators. Only after paying the divine crystals would one be allowed onto the Star Source continent. However, when Jianchen saw the huge waiting line, he could only give up on it. He needed to enter the world of the fallen beast as quickly as he could. He could not waste time here. Afterwards, he made his way over to another tunnel. It was rather quiet there, with very few people entering through it. However, it was the fastest way onto the Star Source continent so far. Stop. Passing through here comes with a fee of 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals. If you don't have it, go line up. The guards there stopped Jianchen. They studied Jianchen and told him coldly. Jianchen had spent the past few days traveling, so he seemed rather travel-weary. When he passed by the meteors, he even became dirted by some dust. Naturally, the guards would not take him seriously. They even belittled him a little. In a world where the laws were incomplete like the spirit's world, even primordial realm experts would not travel through outer space alone. They would use spaceships because it would be very difficult for them to replenish the energy they used for travel. It was exhausting and pointless to travel like this. Those below the primordial realm with a certain level of status obviously would not take risks in outer space. They would always choose to take spaceships. Not only would it be safer and faster, but it also saved effort and was comfortable. Only a few poor cultivators who could not even afford spaceships would travel through outer space by themselves. Here are 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals. With a flip of his hand, 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals suddenly appeared. With his current wealth, let alone 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals, even a block of such crystals was nothing to him. He did not bring any god artifacts with him this time, but he did bring a few divine crystals. The guards were clearly surprised when they saw Jianchen take out 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals like they were nothing. The spirit's world was different from the saint's world. Supreme-grade divine crystals had already run out in the spirit's world. 10,000 of them was not a small sum. Divine crystals were far more precious in the spirit's world. Not only did all the cultivators who had come here need them to cultivate, but they needed them to recover the energy they had expended as well. Divine crystals were crucial to everyone here. After handing over 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals, Jianchen collected a jade medallion and made his way towards the entrance under the strange gazes of the guards. At this moment, a fiery presence appeared behind him. It was an old man in fire-red robes. He gave off the powerful presence of an infinite prime. He was clearly a primordial realm expert who had grasped the laws of fire. The old man was like Jianchen. He wanted to enter the Star Source continent through this tunnel. However, when he saw how Jianchen did not move after seeing him and instead made his way towards the tunnel first, he immediately frowned. His gaze suddenly became vicious. He bellowed, "Where did this brat come from? Don't you know the rules?" With that, the old man swung his hand, and immediately, flames appeared. They surged towards Jianchen with terrifying heat. As soon as the old man attacked, Jianchen sensed his strength with great precision. He was a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime. With the old man's cultivation, any single attack from him could burn late god kings to a crisp. Basically, only primordial realm experts could endure it. Just because of the order of entry, the old man had directly tried to kill Jianchen. Chapter 2670. A single move. Jianchen's primary reason for coming to the remnants of the spirit's world was to go to the world of the fallen beast and save Sacred Feather. He wanted to maintain a low profile with everything. As such, even when he entered the Star Source continent, he would follow the rules. He did not want to complicate matters and create unnecessary problems. However, things did not go as planned. He had never thought he would come across such an unreasonable primordial realm expert just when he wanted to pass through the tunnel. This person directly launched such a vicious attack at him right from the start. It immediately made Jianchen's gaze turn cold. He did not want to make trouble, nor did he want to complicate matters. But that did not mean he could let something like this slide like it did not happen. After all, he was not afraid of trouble. The flames from the old man contained the power of laws. They roared furiously, and the terrifying heat even forced the guards there backwards. No one dared to stop him, nor did anyone dare to speak up. They all looked at the old man with some fear. That was the rules of the Star Source continent. Strength was everything. As long as they did not disturb the stability of the continent, basically no one would interfere. Blocking my way. Kid, you better learn in your next life, or you won't be able to live long in that life either. Though, if you can't even endure my flames, and your soul is burnt to a crisp, you won't even have the chance to have a next life. The old man's eyes were cold. Clearly, he was a murderous person. Just when Jian Chen was about to become swallowed by the flames, a powerful and sharp sword chi suddenly erupted. Compared to his previously ordinary demeanor, Jian Chen had now actually exploded with dazzling light. The ball of silver light was completely condensed from pure sword chi. It was powerful and sharp. As soon as it appeared, sword intent flooded forth. Wherever the sword intent enveloped, the space there, the time there, and the various energies there all seemed to merge with the sword intent, transforming into invisible sword chi. At that moment, the space there had completely become a domain of the sword. The old man's fire was affected as well. Under the impact of the powerful sword intent, the roaring flames actually began to tremble. Their power began to plummet, while the laws of fire rapidly vanished under the influence of the sword intent. This is the laws of the sword. No, how can the sword intent be so powerful? The sudden occurrence made the old man's eyes narrow. Disbelief flooded his face. He was also a primordial realm expert and a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime at that. He immediately knew where the sword intent came from. How is this possible? The kid who paid divine crystals to enter is actually at the primordial realm as well. However, before he could think much of it, his fire was sliced in half by a strand of silver-white sword chi. After that, the sword chi continued onwards, illuminating the sea of stars along the way. Under the stunned and shocked gazes of countless cultivators, it stabbed towards the old man mercilessly. The red-robed old man paled in fright. He could sense a fatal threat from the sword chi. It was so intense that it made his hair stand on end and sent a chill down his spine. However, he reacted extremely quickly. He immediately set up a layer of defense outside his body with the power of his cultivation. At the same time, a low-quality god artifact began to appear. However, before he could equip the god artifact, the space in front of him suddenly pulsed. The powerful sword chi had actually appeared an inch away from him like it had suddenly teleported. It was just too close, and the sword chi was just too fast, so fast that the old man could not react at all. He could only watch as the sword chi pierced his body. Spurt! Blood sprayed. The sword chi pierced through the old man's chest as a streak of silver-white light, making his body tremble on the spot as blood spurted out from his mouth. However, the old man did not die. He stared at Jian Chen like he had just seen a ghost. His eyes were filled with shock and lingering fear as he rapidly retreated. I'll spare you seeing how arduous it was for you to attain your current level of cultivation. If you continue to be so unreasonable and domineering in the future, harassing people as soon as you meet them, you won't be able to live for long. Jian Chen stood at the entrance of the tunnel and stared at the old man coldly. The old man backed up far away as he felt lingering fear. Whenever he thought about the danger he had just been in, he would become covered in cold sweat as chills ran down his spine. With his cultivation as a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime, he was one of the top of the top. As he wandered this place, his life had been in danger many times, but it had never been so close. He could not dodge the attack from before at all. With the combination of the laws of the sword and the laws of space, he did not even have time to equip his god artifact. It would have been impossible for him to escape. Fortunately, the mysterious expert who had appeared out of nowhere had no intention of taking his life, or he definitely would have been done for if the sword chi targeted his soul. His life was completely up to his opponent's whim. Why, you actually possess such strength, so why do you still pay divine crystals? Aren't you, said the old man resentfully. Originally, he had wanted to ask whether he was toying with him, but he forced back his words. Just a single move had struck fear into his heart. He was afraid of accidentally offending Jianchen. However, he did feel aggrieved. He was obviously not an ignorant person to be able to reach his current level of cultivation. He knew who he could provoke and who he could not. Normally, he would never make trouble for juniors of large organizations as long as they had not offended him beforehand. However, all juniors of large organizations would enter the Star Source continent under the lead of their seniors. There would be no need for them to pay 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals. People who traveled alone like Jian Chen and paid the entry fee would all be weaker people of insignificant backgrounds. Moreover, in the old man's eyes, he could kill or crush those people as he wished. He had never thought he would bite off far more than he could chew this time. However, when Jian Chen heard the red-robed old man's words, he became confused. Was there no need to hand over 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals when using this tunnel? At this moment, one of the guards made their way before Jian Chen, trembling. As he apologized, he handed back the 10,000 supreme-grade divine crystals from Jian Chen with both hands. He was extremely polite. After a series of questions, Jian Chen learned that all primordial realm experts could enter the Star Source continent through this special tunnel for free. Only cultivators below the primordial realm and were not accompanied by primordial realm experts had to follow a rule like this. Chapter 2671. The group of four. After dealing with that, Jian Chen smiled indifferently and glanced at the frightened, surprised, and wronged red-robed old man in the distance. Afterwards, he entered the tunnel leading to the Star Source continent. Just keep the divine crystals as a gift from me. Jian Chen's voice drifted out from the tunnel. The supreme-grade divine crystals were worth nothing in his eyes. He could not be bothered with taking them back. He did not kill the red-robed old man either. Although he could kill a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime effortlessly even without the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, it was not like they had any irreconcilable grudges. An appropriate punishment was enough. Of course, there was another important reason. He was in a hurry to go to the world of the fallen beast. He did not want to make things complicated here. If he became delayed, he would probably be filled with regret for the rest of his life. Turns out he doesn't know the rules here at all. The red-robed old man understood everything after Jian Chen left. He looked at the bleeding wound on his chest. His face was filled with bitterness, as well as a hint of gladness. Fortunately, that senior wasn't a bloodthirsty person, or my life would be. The old man produced a long sigh. He did not plan on entering the Star Source continent immediately. Instead, he just sat down on the spot and fished out some healing pills to recover. He secretly warned himself to hold back with his actions in the future. Nearby, the cultivators who stood in the long lines obviously witnessed the conflict between Jian Chen and the red-robed old man. Many of them were stunned by the great strength Jian Chen had displayed. Then they gulped and broke out into discussions. Heavens, that is the famed Yen Mo of the spirit's world. Yen Mo has actually been defeated. Who is that young man in white? How is he so strong? It was one strike, just one strike to defeat Yen Mo. Yen Mo is a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime. Surely that young man is a chaotic prime, right? Yen Mo has committed evil all these years in the spirit's world. If he remains alive, who knows how many more people will die? Why didn't that mysterious expert finish him off? What a pity. Yen Mo almost died. Grandfather, don't worry. I will definitely work hard on cultivating and break through to the primordial realm as soon as possible so that I can personally kill Yen Mo and avenge you. Around half of the cultivators there secretly cursed Yen Mo. As they stood in the line, it was clear that they were not primordial realm experts or anyone with particularly powerful backgrounds. And it was exactly people like them that Yen Mo would never show any mercy towards. He would directly kill them if they did even the slightest thing that displeased him. Grand Primes were basically unwilling to come to this ruined world, so the strongest experts that could be found here were chaotic primes. However, basically all of them had only come to escort their juniors. They would not stay for long. As a result, with Yen Mo's cultivation as a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime, He could indeed act without consequences here. At this moment, a medium-sized spaceship slowly glid over from afar, stopping nearby. All the cultivators looked over reflexively and discovered that the spaceship was a commercial one. It was the type that could be hired for a certain amount of divine crystals. It did not belong to a large organization. The spaceship stopped, and many cultivators immediately flew out. They were packed like locusts, where several 100,000 would be a low estimate. The spaceship was bigger on the inside. One of them was equivalent to a miniature world. It could hold 1 million people with ease. Basically, all of the cultivators from the spaceship lined up at the very end. Clearly, they wanted to enter the Star Source continent as well. An extremely few number of primordial realm experts skipped the line and directly entered the continent through the special tunnel. Its Yenmo is actually injured. When the primordial realm experts saw the old man healing, they became stern. All of them made their way around him. Most of the primordial realm experts were early infinite primes. There was a single 4th heavenly layer infinite prime among them. They were still quite far off from a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime like Yenmo in terms of strength. At this moment, 4 old men in simple robes flew out from the spaceship. They all gave off the presences of late god kings. Late god kings were very common here, so they did not raise any particular attention. However, what really drew the gazes of people were the swords on their backs. Each sword was wrapped in beast hide, only leaving a hilt poking out. Their appearance managed to attract much attention, as it was far too rare for people to carry swords on their backs like that in both the spirit's world and the saint's world. The 4 old men did not mind the strange gazes. They flew through the crowd like it was no big deal, about to line up to enter the Star Source continent. However, at this moment, they suddenly saw Yenmo, who was healing there. Their eyes all sharpened, and a powerful sword intent radiated from them. It's Yenmo. He's actually here. Fall into formation and kill him, the 4 old men bellowed out together, and their cultivation as late god kings completely erupted. With the guidance of their fingers, clear thrums rang out, and 4 metal swords shot into the air. They shone resplendently, giving off a powerful sword intent. The 4 of them immediately stood in a formation. Their hands moved about in front of their chests, creating seals. They bellowed out, "Of the vast world, all is one. With the nirvanic sword formation, only we are supreme. With the 4 swords as one, worlds shall be annihilated." With their voices, the 4 swords in the air shone brightly, becoming 4 huge pillars of light that pierced the surroundings. Each pillar of light enveloped a single person, and when they chanted, "4 swords as one," the 4 pillars suddenly fused together, shining blindingly. The 4 of them vanished into the pillars, as if they had fused into the pillar with the swords. The sudden disturbance alarmed all the cultivators there. At that moment, whether it be the primordial realm experts who had just disembarked from the spaceship or the godhood cultivators waiting in line, they all looked over. It's the 4 strange people. What are they doing? It looks like they're attacking Yenmo? 4 late god kings are actually challenging a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime? Is there something wrong with them? Discovering their intentions, everyone became stunned, including the primordial realm experts. Yenmo also discovered the situation behind him. He immediately stopped healing and stood up. He glared at the fused pillar of light, and his face sank. "It's you lot. I looked for you for so long, but I never thought you would come to me today. Since you're here already, you might as well stay and hand over the secret technique obediently." Yenmo sneered. Excitement flickered in his eyes secretly as flames erupted from his body. "There are chaotic primes on the Star Source continent, so I have to take the 4 of them away before they arrive," thought Yenmo. The 4 people before him grasped an extremely powerful secret technique, so powerful that it even tempted him, someone who comprehended the laws of fire. He had personally witnessed the 4 old men kill a 3rd heavenly layer infinite prime as early god kings when they used the sword technique. Chapter 2672. A terrifying sword formation. 4 early god kings had actually killed a 3rd heavenly layer infinite prime so many cultivation levels higher through a sword formation alone. If news of this made it out, Everyone would think it was a make-believe story. No one would believe it. This was because let alone 4 early God Kings, even 4 peak God Kings or even 4 supreme God Kings from the God King's throne could not kill a 3rd heavenly layer infinite prime through a formation alone. Yet, Yen Mo just happened to have witnessed something so preposterous from the 4 old men. He had seen it with his naked eyes, so it was impossible for him to refute it. It had to be mentioned that the 4 old men were early God Kings back then. That was more than enough to demonstrate the shockingness of the sword formation. It was enough to drive everyone crazy over it. Yen Mo was one of the people who had been driven crazy by the sword formation. Even though he had no inkling about the way of the sword, he would benefit as long as he could get his hands on the sword formation and study it. As a result, when he saw the 4 old men, his heart began to thump with excitement. He was tempted to howl out in joy. However, he knew that there were many onlookers in the surroundings. There were even chaotic primes in some of the spaceships, so he dared not show any of his joy, just in case he raised any suspicion. I need to end the battle fast and capture them as quickly as I can. Then I can take them away and slowly get them to spill their secrets. As long as the 4 of them end up in my hands, I'm sure I can get what I want from them. Yen Mo made up his mind. He used his full strength right from the start. His cultivation surged forth violently, and the laws of fire descended. The scorching flames distorted the space there as terrifying heat pervaded the surroundings, forcing back the closer cultivators. Under Yen Mo's control, the terrifying flames formed a ball. Like a cage, it enveloped the 4 old men, obscuring what was happening there. He tried to hide everything. He did not want even more people to see what happened next. Afterwards, he used the power of his cultivation to create a huge hand. It passed through the cage made from the laws of fire and fell towards the 4 old men. Even though he was injured by Jianchen, he was still a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime after all. He was still extremely powerful despite his wounds. Many of the cultivators standing in line secretly shook their heads at this. They sighed for the 4 old men. Even though the 4 old men comprehended one of the laws with the greatest offensive power, and their sword formation seemed extraordinary, there was still no one who thought highly of them. All of them believed the 4 old men would be facing death. The difference was just far too great. How could 4 late God Kings face off against a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime? In their opinion, they might have been able to put up a fight with their laws of the sword along with the support of a sword formation if it were a 1st heavenly layer infinite prime. However, it was utterly hopeless against a 5th heavenly layer. At this moment, an alarming streak of light suddenly appeared. The cage of Yen Mo's laws of the fire seemed as fragile as paper before the light. The light ripped open a hole silently before continuing onwards and piercing through Yen Mo's huge hand with a blinding glow. It directly continued towards Yen Mo. Yen Mo immediately felt like it had locked onto his presence firmly. He stared at the incoming light, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. His face changed drastically, now filled with shock and disbelief. He could sense a threat from the sword chi. The sword formation from 4 mere late God Kings was actually enough to threaten him, a 5th heavenly infinite prime. Such a matter was astounding. That was not it. With his powerful soul and instincts, he could sense a sliver of obscure power that made him shiver in fright. It was impossible for this power to come from a God King. Let alone God Kings, even infinite primes could not come close to it. How is this possible? They're clearly just late God Kings. Yen Mo's heart churned. In the next moment, a low-quality God artifact appeared and enveloped him completely. This was the armor he wanted to wear when he faced Jianchen, but he just did not have the time to do so before Jianchen's laws of space. Now that he faced the attack from the 4 old men, he finally had the opportunity to use it. At the same time, he extended a figure, and he immediately conjured the laws of fire, turning into a red pillar and darting towards the sword chi. He attempted to weaken the sword chi's power. The sword chi tore through everything with astonishing might, crushing everything Yen Mo had set up to block its way. In the end, it struck Yen Mo's waist. Blood splattered immediately. Yen Mo's waist was severed, cut into 2. The low-quality God artifact on him was basically useless, unable to stop anything. Yen Mo paled in fright. He lowered his head to look at the other half of his body before glancing at the sword chi again. He showed horror for the first time. To the other side, the sword chi stopped nearby after cutting Yen Mo in half. It rapidly dimmed, vanishing as if it had lost all power. It revealed the four old men. He's actually still alive. Fall into formation. All right, wipe out his soul and kill him for good, the four old men bellowed out when they saw how Yen Mo was still alive. They stood in a sword formation once again with great understanding. Yen Mo had already learnt the power of the sword formation. Even the god artifact he believed to be extremely tough was basically useless before it. There was no way he was bold enough to take on a second attack like that. He knew that he managed to survive this time due to luck. The attack did not touch his soul. Otherwise, he would be dead already. As a result, when he heard the calls from the four old men, Yen Mo was scared stiff. He dared not linger a moment longer, shooting off into the tunnel nearby with a flash. He entered the Star Source continent. Get him! The four old men called out together, and killing intent shone in their eyes. As if they had some irreconcilable grievance with Yen Mo, they immediately pursued him. The entrance they took was specially prepared for Primordial Realm experts. Primordial Realm experts could use it for free, but those below the Primordial Realm had to pay a fee of 10,000 Supreme-grade Divine Crystals. However, none of the guards stationed there dared to stop them as they chased Yen Mo. As a result, they passed through smoothly. As soon as they vanished, a few figures immediately flickered out from some spaceships nearby. They moved extremely quickly, entering the Star Source continent through the same tunnel. They were all chaotic primes. The sword formation that the four old men had used managed to force the fifth heavenly layer infinite prime, Yen Mo, into fleeing, despite them only being late god kings. It was clearly powerful and mystical enough to catch the attention of many chaotic primes. Chapter 2673. Past acquaintances. After the various chaotic primes entered the Star Source continent, the space returned to peace again. Of course, it was only peaceful on the surface. The hearts of the cultivator who stood in the long lines were in turmoil, thumping heavily and speeding up the flow of blood through their bodies. Heavens! Surely that can't be real. For late god kings actually heavily injured the fifth heavenly layer infinite prime Yen Mo. It was just one strike. They used one strike to incapacitate Yen Mo, forcing him to flee onto the Star Source continent. This is unbelievable. Even the low-quality god artifact was split into two. How powerful is that? Are the four of them really just late god kings? Oh my god, for god kings are actually hunting down a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime. Are they disciples of a sovereign? Even the disciples of sovereigns aren't that powerful. They used a terrifying sword formation. A sword formation. After the momentary silence, the surroundings exploded into a hubbub. Everyone was amazed. They showed shock, disbelief, and so on. There were even a few late god kings who rubbed their eyes, struggling to accept what they had just witnessed. The Star Source continent was not large, but the land was used much more effectively than the Cloud Plains land. The Spirit's world was already destroyed. Only 5 pieces of land remained in the entire world, so basically all the cultivators from the Saints' world gathered there. Naturally, the place was overpopulated, making every inch of it precious. They used up everywhere they could to build various structures and stores. Even a few places that could not be used were claimed by weaker cultivators to set up temporary dwellings. The inns on the Star Source continent were extremely expensive. No one besides descendants of large clans and organizations could afford them. As a result, all they could do was remain outside and brave the wilderness, facing constant danger. There were several dozen cities of various sizes on the Star Source continent. Basically all of them were under the control of a few large clans or organizations from the Saints' world. The largest city was Star Source City. Star Source City was named after the continent. Not only was it the largest city on there, but it was also one that had weathered time and survived. It had stood there since time immemorial. Over the years, the cities on the continent would constantly be replaced. After wars and battles, they would be destroyed and rebuilt. However, Star Source City had survived all that. The city was a part of the Star Source continent, protected by the Grand Exalts formation. In a place where even Grand Primes were unwilling to stay, chaotic primes basically stood supreme, so it was obviously impossible for it to be destroyed. Jian Chen had arrived in Starsource City because the teleportation formation between the 5 sacred lands of the spirit's world was located there. It was also the only teleportation formation on the entire continent. The spirit's world was ruined. Space was incomplete, unlike the saint's world. The 5 sacred lands were extremely distant from each other as well, so building a long-range teleportation formation was basically impossible. Even some peak organizations in the Saints' world did not have the ability to construct a long-range teleportation formation under such harsh conditions. The only teleportation formation on the Starsource continent was apparently personally cast down by the Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths countless years ago. Only teleportation formations personally cast down by Grand Exalts could ensure safe travel over this tremendous distance. Jian Chen directly made his way towards the center of the city where the teleportation formation was located. He looked around along the way, studying the stores on the sides of the streets. The buying power of divine crystals is actually so great. I can actually purchase a low-quality god artifact for half the price compared to the Saint's world. And not just that, even the cultivation methods of various levels are cheaper here, Jian Chen wondered in interest. He knew that divine crystals were simply far too valuable in the spirit's world. As a result, their worth had increased. If he could bring in the divine crystals from the saint's world and buy a bunch of god artifacts and cultivation methods here before reselling them in the saint's world, it would be an extremely fast way to make money. Of course, there were people who did that. A low-quality god artifact just retrieved from the burial region. It's perfect only for 500,000 supreme-grade divine crystals. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Come get it before it's gone, a call rang out. An old man sat on the ground up ahead, laying out a shining sword and some fragments that clearly belonged to other god artifacts. 500,000 supreme-grade divine crystals for a low-quality god artifact? For real? Let's go have a look. With that, many cultivators immediately made their way over. A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. 500,000 supreme-grade divine crystals for a low-quality god artifact was indeed too cheap. Even with the buying power of divine crystals here, it was impossible for a god artifact to sell for that cheap. He immediately made his way over as well out of curiosity. He could tell with a single glance that the interior of the god artifact was completely destroyed, and its perfect shell had clearly been handled as well. The resplendent light was due to a formation that disguised its interior, so it seemed to be in perfect condition. If it really was used, it would completely collapse on itself after a few attacks. Jian Chen continued on his way and discovered that there were quite a few people doing such things. There were scams everywhere. The slightest carelessness could cost a great deal. Of course, he did discover some impressive items, such as heavenly resources that a few cultivators had managed to find out of pure chance from zones of danger, as well as impressive materials for refining weapons. He swept the surroundings with the senses of his soul and even discovered a fragment of a high-quality god artifact in a store protected by formations. The spirit's world had once experienced a devastating war. Far too many experts died here, so there would obviously be a few remnants remaining. As a result, this place became a treasured land for training and exploration. Jian Chen had almost arrived at the teleportation formation now. At this moment, Jian Chen suddenly looked at the sky and discovered a ball of fire shooting over at lightning speed. It moved extremely quickly, crossing the sky and heading directly for the teleportation formation. Jian Chen recognized the person with a single glance. It was Yen Mo, who he had injured with a single strike. "Move, all of you, move. Let me use the teleportation formation first." Yen Mo bellowed out. He was frantic. Jian Chen ignored Yen Mo. Instead, he looked behind him, and his eyes narrowed suddenly. A strand of sword chi followed Yen Mo. It gave off powerful sword intent and also moved extremely quickly. It was no slower than Yen Mo. However, what Jian Chen saw was the interior of the sword chi. There were 4 figures wielding a powerful sword formation, fusing as one to create the sword chi that pursued Yen-Emo, the nirvanic sword formation. It's the presence of the nirvanic sword formation. At the same time, the silent sword spirits awakened in the depths of Jian Chen's consciousness. They began paying attention to the outside world for the first time in quite a while. It's them. Why would they appear in the spirit's world? A strange light flickered through Jian Chen's eyes, as well as undisguisable excitement. He had already recognized the 4 of them. They were the 4 brothers who had obtained the partial legacy of the nirvanic immortal Exalt back on the world of the Tianyuan continent, Ada and his brothers. Suddenly, he looked at the fleeing Yen-Emo and formed a sword with his fingers, directly extending it towards Yen-Emo. Chapter 2674. Slain. A sword chi shot off into the air, shining brightly and illuminating most of the Star Source continent, targeting Yen-Emo with powerful sword intent. Yen-Emo fled desperately. He no longer had the courage to face the 4 brothers' nirvanic sword formation. It was simply too powerful, basically enough to startle the world. His low-quality god artifact was actually useless before it. The terrifying power struck fear into the depths of his heart. As a result, the only thing he could think of right now was to leave the Star Source continent through the teleportation formation and avoid their pursuit. He was just about to reach the teleportation formation, but a strand of powerful sword chi suddenly swept through the air and shot over with great speed. Before the attack even arrived, the terrifying sword chi had locked onto him. Yen-Emo turned around to look. When he discovered Jian Chen on a busy street, his face suddenly changed drastically. He immediately called out, "Senior, it was this old crook's fault outside, causing you offense. This old crook will apologize to you right here, so I hope you can be the bigger person and spare someone as lowly as this old crook." Yen-Mo's attitude experienced a complete 180. Not only did he refer to Jian Chen as a senior, but he even called himself an old crook. He no longer dared to show any arrogance at all. As he said that, a powerful energy surged out from Yen-Emo, forming a shield of fire to block Jian Chen's sword chi. However, Yen-Emo had already been injured twice. The nirvanic sword formation from the 4 brothers had caused him even greater harm than Jian Chen's previous attack, so his battle prowess was affected. He was nowhere close to his peak, so the shield he condensed in a hurry was obviously unable to stop Jian Chen's attack. Spurt! The sword chi collapsed the shield before passing through his body again. Another bloody hole appeared. However, Jian Chen did not want to kill Yen-Emo with that attack. He just wanted to slow him down to prevent him from reaching the teleportation formation. As a result, even though his sword chi was astonishing, it only inflicted a wound to Yen-Mo's body and was not fatal. However, Yen-Emo understood exactly how powerful Jian Chen was. He did not believe Jian Chen was trying to slow him down at all. Instead, he interpreted Jian Chen as someone who disliked those who acted arrogantly and harassed others. He had already received a bloody punishment for that earlier outside. And now, his calls and ruthless actions to reach the teleportation formation sooner had perhaps displeased Jian Chen yet again. As a result, he dished out a slight punishment again, which was why he apologized in a hurry. "Thank you for showing mercy, Senior. I've run out of options because of the situation I'm in right now. Alright, Senior, the 4 people pursuing me possess a supreme sword formation. With Senior's mastery over the way of the sword, I'm confident that you'll be able to reach the apex if you obtain it." He would have been better off without mentioning the sword formation. Now that it was mentioned, Jian Chen frowned, and a cold light flickered through his eyes. He glared at Yen-Emo. In the next moment, the space around Yen-Emo suddenly pulsed. The space there was disturbed. The laws of space permeated the area, as if someone was tampering with it. Yen-Mo's face changed drastically. He obviously discovered the difference in the surroundings. It directly affected his speed, slowing him down to a millionth of his original speed. He would only need 5 or 10 seconds to reach the teleportation formation originally, but he would probably need a minute now. "Senior, what are you doing?" Yen-Emo panicked and suddenly looked at Jian Chen. "I happen to be using the teleportation formation," Jian Chen said indifferently. However, with that delay, the 4 brothers caught up from behind. The huge strand of sword chi split into 4 smaller strands of sword chi and surrounded Yen Mo. The 4 brothers were obscured in the light, fading in and out. They seemed to be creating hand seals. W. What is this sword formation? W. Why do 4 god kings wield such great power? Yen Mo's face changed drastically, and he turned pale. He discovered that he was now trapped in the sword formation. The 4 god kings seemed to grasp more than one sword formation. Every single one of them were extremely powerful. The 4 of them had split up from the sword chi and created another sword formation. Moreover, the sword formation possessed the power to isolate space and time. It could trap an entire region for good. The 4 of them stood in a square, forming a formation that Yen Mo struggled to break out of. What a powerful sword formation! Countless people witnessed what was going on in the sky from the streets below. Jianchen was naturally no exception. At that moment, he was surprised. He could not help but sigh in amazement. With his insight, he could tell just how powerful the 4 brothers' sword formation was. Although their cultivation levels were nothing special, they could unleash unimaginable power once they used their sword formations. Moreover, he could closely sense a somewhat familiar presence from the sword formation. The sword of mortality, the sword of reincarnation, the sword of slaughter, and the sword of severance. They are the 4 swords of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. Although I've never seen their actual forms, the Aneta Tower was filled with their presence. Every single sword contains a different aura. Their sword formation actually contains the aura of the 4 swords. No wonder it's so powerful. Jianchen was secret amazed. He could vaguely see the presence that the 4 swords had left behind in the Aneta Tower from the hazy figures of the 4 brothers. Yen Mo, you massacred the entire family of our savior. Today we will avenge him. Kill him. At this moment, the 4 brothers bellowed out together. Suddenly, they turned into 4 swords and intertwined with alarming light. The moment the 4 swords crossed with one another, the world seemed to achieve peace, where even the sun and moon switched positions. They erupted with enough power to terrify countless infinite primes. It was like they could split the heavens from the earth and tear up the cosmos. However, this devastating power only appeared for a split second before vanishing in the blink of an eye like it had never appeared. Even Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. The flash of devastating power when the 4 strands of sword chi crossed one another through the use of the sword formation had astonished him. What a powerful sword formation! Jianchen was amazed. However, he did not feel surprised. After all, the 4 brothers' legacy came from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. The Nirvanic Immortal Exalt was the undisputed greatest expert of the Immortals world, such that even the old master of the twin swords paled slightly in comparison. The sword formation vanished, and Yen Mo fell out of the sky as a corpse. A 5th heavenly layer infinite prime had fallen to the hands of 4 late god kings. Everyone who witnessed this within Starsource City was left speechless. Whether it be the cultivators on the streets or the primordial realm experts hidden throughout the place, they were all stunned. They were tongue-tied from shock. 4 late god kings had actually slain a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime. Such a matter was unprecedented. If this made it out, it would be enough to shake up the entire Saints world. Chapter 2675. Threat Plop. A sound ra plop. A sound rang out in the wide streets, and Yen Mo's corpse struck the ground heavily. It kicked up dust. The people in the surroundings continued to stare at Yen Mo's corpse. They were dumbfounded. All of them felt like they were dreaming. They dared not accept what they had just witnessed. Out in the wide streets, and Yen Mo's corpse struck the ground heavily. It kicked up dust. The people in the surroundings continued to stare at Yen Mo's corpse. They were dumbfounded. All of them felt like they were dreaming. They dared not accept what they had just witnessed. The 4 brothers slowly descended from the air. They stared at Yen Mo's corpse coldly. They were filled with undisguisable hatred. This hatred was so deep that it did not subside even after they killed Yen Mo. Jianchen suddenly vanished from the other side. He had crossed several streets using the laws of space, appearing near Yen Mo's corpse. He stared at the 4 brothers and revealed a rare smile. The four brothers had already removed Yenmo's space ring. They seemed to sense something, and they suddenly turned around to look behind them. Immediately, their gazes all gathered on Jianchen. His familiar face and familiar presence made their eyes narrow. Jianchen. In the next moment, they instinctively called out. They were filled with joy, and their voices were filled with surprise and shock. They probably had not thought that they would be able to meet an old acquaintance from the lower world in the vast spirits world either. Back on the Tianyuan continent, the four brothers were not particularly close to Jianchen, much less anything close to being sworn brothers. However, they were friends. In this foreign land, this friendship was precious, so the four brothers obviously became overjoyed. Unknowingly, their hatred towards Yen Ma faded by quite a lot after they saw Jianchen. Just when Jianchen wanted to say something, he suddenly frowned. He looked at the only place with entrances to the Star Source continent in the air, and his face changed. Quite a few chaotic primes have come. They are probably coming for you. You better leave quickly, Jianchen said sternly. The four brothers seemed to sense the arrival of the chaotic primes as well. They also became stern. They could deal with infinite primes like Yen Mo with Jianchen by their side, but chaotic primes were nothing like fifth heavenly layer infinite primes. They did not have the slightest confidence in facing a chaotic prime. Moreover, they too could sense that there was far more than one chaotic prime coming for them right now. I founded a Tianyuan clan on the cloud plane of the 49 Great Plains of the Saints' World. You can come find me there in the future, Jianchen said secretly. He had no idea if he could find the four brothers again in the spirits world after separating here, so he took the initiative to give them a method of contact. The four brothers nodded. Time was extremely tight. They dared not tarry at all. Immediately, they fell into a sword formation and prepared to escape. Stay put, juniors, don't go, fellows, please stay. At the same time, various calls rang out together. Several chaotic primes gave off astonishing presences in the distant sky, tearing through the air with unmatched speeds. They hurried over like streaks of lightning. They created such a great disturbance that it rumbled like thunder, deafening all the cultivators present. Some of the weaker cultivators even directly fainted. These chaotic primes were clearly the stronger experts who had come pursuing, which was why they had managed to shake off everyone else and arrive first. Before they even arrived, terrifying pressures had already descended, causing the space around the four brothers to suddenly freeze. The damaged laws of the world in the surroundings fell into a mess. Under the presence, the laws became disordered. Jianchen was the closest to the four brothers. He was affected as well. Under the tremendous pressure, he felt his body become as heavy as a mountain. The space there seemed to become quicksand, making it difficult for him to move. Oh no! Jianchen's heart sank. Even he had been reduced to such a shape, let alone the four brothers. It would be impossible for them to escape under the terrifying pressure. A vicious light flickered through Jianchen's eyes. The 4 strands of profound sword qi he had condensed in his soul suddenly jumped to life. 3 of them were ready to be used. He could already tell that these experts were late chaotic primes, which was the 7th heavenly layer or even beyond that. Before such experts, only his profound sword qi would have some effect. Perhaps he could buy some time for the 4 brothers. Master, please wait. The 4 brothers aren't as simple as you imagine them to be. Just when Jianchen was about to draw the profound sword qi, the indifferent voices of the sword spirits rang out in his head. Jianchen was surprised. However, before he could ask about it, the 4 brothers suddenly bellowed out, "Let's go! With the 4 swords as one, all shall be destroyed." Dazzling light shot into the air. The formation from the 4 brothers seemed to be able to penetrate all obstructions. The 4 clusters of light suddenly fused together before vanishing. The restrictive pressures from the chaotic primes remained, making the space seem like it was frozen. However, the 4 brothers were no longer there. What? They escaped? The chaotic primes basically arrived where the 4 brothers had vanished at the same time. They were all surprised. They expanded the powerful senses of their souls to search, enveloping the entire Star Source continent in an instant. Afterwards, Another dozen or so chaotic primes arrived. They all expanded the senses of their souls as well, enveloping the entire place in search of the four brothers. However, no matter how they looked, the four brothers seemed to have vanished into thin air. They could not find a single trace of them. They've already escaped. It really is such a pity to miss such a powerful sword formation. Do any of you know what that sword formation is? It can actually display such power in the hands of four god kings. How terrifying! If we obtain that sword formation, the strength of our clan would increase by quite a lot. The chaotic primes all gathered there and sighed and shook their heads. Many of them felt very regretful. Kid, you seem to know the four of them? At this moment, a cold voice rang out. Jianchen immediately felt like a sharp pair of eyes had locked onto him, piercing into him like blades. The question came from a bald old man in white robes. He was the expert who had arrived first. He was a late chaotic prime. With that, all the chaotic primes gathered there looked over. Many of their gazes were piercing. Senior, whether I know them or not doesn't seem to have anything to do with Senior. Jian Chen's face did not change as he replied steadily. However, he had already started fuming inside. The old man originally wanted to threaten Jian Chen, but seeing how fearless he was, he ran out of confidence. He immediately snorted coldly. Kid, which organization in the Saints' world do you belong to? You're so arrogant that you should be careful of causing problems for the organization behind you. Chapter 2676. Surrounded by admirers, be careful of causing problems for the organization behind you? Jian Chen sneered. The old man's cultivation level was even higher than Su Rant's. He was an expert who had reached the 7th heavenly layer of chaotic prime. It was impossible for Jian Chen to fend off someone like that unless he fused the twin swords. As a result, Jian Chen could only intimidate him. He had to strike fear into his heart to stop him from acting recklessly. The old man immediately paled in anger as he looked at Jian Chen's mocking expression. He was a mighty 7th heavenly layer chaotic prime, a great elder of a peak clan in the Saints' world. His status was so great, so revered, yet he was being made fun of by a junior here. It immediately vexed him. Faint killing intent began to build up within his heart. People like him would treat their pride with extremely great importance. Jian Chen's attitude directly trampled over his pride. However, before he could do anything, Jian Chen's next words made his face change drastically. I came to the spirit's world under the escortment of Senior Heartless from the Myriad Bone Guild. Do you plan on creating trouble for Senior Heartless of the Myriad Bone Guild today on the Star Source continent? Jian Chen said relaxedly. What did you say? The Myriad Bone Guild? Do you come from the Myriad Bone Guild? The old man who tried to threaten Jian Chen immediately paled in fright. Just what kind of existence was the Myriad Bone Guild? Even though they were just an organization of assassins, they stood at the pinnacle of the Saints' world. They had truly reached the apex, a terrifying organization only second to Grand Exalts. In the Saints' world, the weaker cultivators would not necessarily have the right to learn about the Myriad Bone Guild, but these chaotic primes knew exactly what it represented. The Myriad Bone Guild was an organization they could only look up to, but it also struck fear into their hearts. Let alone them, even the powerful clans behind them held deep fear towards the Myriad Bone Guild. He's actually from the Myriad Bone Guild. With that, all of the chaotic primes gathered there could no longer remain calm. Just the 3 words, Myriad Bone Guild, had frightened quite a lot of them. They deeply understood just how powerful the Myriad Bone Guild was. If they offended the Myriad Bone Guild, not only would they be dead for sure, but even the organizations behind them would be destroyed. Wait, what did you just say? Senior Heartless of the Myriad Bone Guild? Isn't this Senior Heartless? At this moment, the expression of one of the chaotic primes changed. He asked with a voice that trembled slightly. I've basically heard about all the famed experts of the Myriad Bone Guild. There's no one who goes by the name of Heartless among them. No, there is one. Is he? Immediately, all the chaotic primes gathered there seemed to think of something. Their faces changed abruptly. As for the old man who had threatened Jian Chen first, he had already become sheet white. Impossible. Impossible. The Heartless Child is the second boss of the Myriad Bone Guild. He reached the 8th heavenly layer of Grand Prime a long time ago, and it's said that he's extremely close to the 9th heavenly layer now. His status is so great, so why would he personally escort a junior to the spirit's world? A chaotic prime cried out in disbelief. The Heartless Child's reputation was far too great. Even to the Peak clan behind him, it bore the weight of a mountain. He was an existence they could never afford to provoke. So you're actually from the Myriad Bone Guild. I am Zhan Yun. I come from the Heavens sect from planet Kangmang of the Saints world. Our Heavens sect has made many deals with the Myriad Bone Guild in the past. We're one of their biggest clients, so speaking of which, we're not really strangers. A heavy voice boomed out from the sky. A sagely old man descended with a group of disciples from the Heavens sect. It seemed like he had just entered the Star Source continent. It's actually the people of the Heavens sect. The Heavens sect is the unofficial ruler of planet Kangming. Their strongest ancestor is the planet lord there. Zhan Yun is one of the 6 heaven great elders of the Heavens sect. The great elders of the Heavens sect are divided into 3 levels: heaven, earth, and mortal. They correspond to late chaotic prime, mid chaotic prime, and early chaotic prime. The people who usually accompany their juniors to the spirit's world are mortal and earth great elders. I never thought they would send a heaven great elder this time. How rare. The arrival of the great elder of the Heavens sect immediately raised the attention of many. Planet Kangming ranked among the top 10 out of the 81 great planets of the Saints world. As their unofficial ruler, the Heavens sect was extremely powerful among all the peak organizations of the Saints world. The great elder of the Heavens sect, Zhan Yun, glided over through the air. He smiled and seemed approachable, arriving before Jianqin in just a few steps. He sighed in amazement. I was fortunate enough to see you earlier when he crossed through the tunnel between the worlds. However, a supreme expert accompanied you, so you moved with astonishing speed. I was on a sky vessel, and with its speed, I could only catch a single glance of you before you vanished. I was utterly amazed by that senior's terrifying cultivation. I began to contemplate just which important figure of the Saints' world had ventured to the Spirit's world. Only now have I learnt from you that it's Senior Heartless of the Myriad Bone Guild. In all these years I've lived, I've only heard about Senior Heartless' great name. I've never had the right to witness his might in person. I never thought I would actually brush past the famous Senior Heartless in the tunnel earlier. It really is a stroke of luck for me. Zhan Yen was rather excited, behaving as if it were a great honor to brush past the Heartless Child. Even as a chaotic prime, he struggled to maintain his demeanor. However, with that, Jian Chen's identity became even more consolidated. There were people who doubted whether Jian Chen really came from the Myriad Bone Guild or not earlier, but they firmly believed it now. Everyone's gazes towards Jian Chen underwent an overwhelming change. They struggled to imagine just how great his status was in the Myriad Bone Guild to be personally escorted to the spirit's world by the Heartless Child. Even if they were 100 times braver, they would still never dare to offend someone like that. Even the ancestors behind them would never dare to. As for the old man who had threatened Jian Chen earlier, he was filled with regret. His attitude experienced a 180 transformation, and he lowered himself to apologize to Jian Chen. He could not afford to not apologize. If he did not resolve this slight falling out as soon as possible, he would probably be punished by his ancestor when he returned. After all, they could not afford to offend the Myriad Bone Guild, much less someone personally accompanied by the Heartless Child. The status of such a person would be unimaginably great. The great elder from the Heavens sect did his best to establish a good relationship with Jian Chen. He treated Jian Chen so kindly that it made the disciples of the Heavens sect behind him widen their eyes. They were in a state of disbelief. At that moment, the great elder had done something that completely toppled their understanding. The proud disciples of the Heavens sect struggled to accept this. It was not just the great elder from the Heavens sect either. The other chaotic primes gathered here had lowered themselves as well, smiling as they conversed with Jian Chen. In the blink of an eye, Jian Chen became the center of attention. He became a target that all the organizations tried to appease. He was surrounded by admirers. However, Jian Qin instead felt pressured. He knew that his relationship with the Myriad Bone Guild was a collaboration at most. It was completely different from what everyone imagined it to be. If the truth was revealed and the chaotic primes realized that they had been toyed with, they would never drop the matter. As a result, he did not stay any longer. He came up with a reason to break away from them before stepping onto the teleportation formation and leaving the Star Source continent. Even the 5-colored divine crystals for the teleportation formation were covered by a few chaotic primes. They took the initiative to pay for him. Swish! With a flash of white light, Jian Qin vanished from the teleportation formation. He had left the Star Source continent. The Dark Star continent was another sacred land in the remnants of the Spirit's world. It was much larger than the Star Source continent, equivalent to the Cloud Plane. Of course, this was not the complete Dark Star continent either, it was just a broken fragment. The rules on the Dark Star continent and the Star Source continent were basically the same. It was mostly the same apart from their differing names. Dark Star City was the only major city on the Dark Star continent, and it was protected by formations from a Grand Exalt. It possessed the only teleportation formation on the entire continent. However, the Dark Star continent was much more prosperous than the Star Source continent, as the number of cultivators gathered there amounted to several dozen times more. This was all because of the miniature world sealed here, the world of the fallen beast renowned in the Spirit's world. Chapter 2677. The 100 Tribulations God King Pill. The world of the fallen beast was extremely famous in the Spirit's world. It could be said that all cultivators who possessed a great grasp over information or had spent some time in the Spirit's world would know about its existence. This was because the world of the fallen beast possessed the only race that completely survived after the Spirit's world's destruction. That was one of the peak races that roamed the Spirit's world in the past, the Dark Star race. It was also because of the Dark Star race that the piece of land had been named the Dark Star continent. When the Spirit's world was still intact, this land was a tiny piece of the vast territory under the Dark Star race's control. Of course, the Spirit's world was now in tatters. Only 5 fragments of land in somewhat better condition remained. As a result, the Dark Star continent's area was less than 1/10 of the Dark Star race's former territory. In terms of territory alone, the Dark Star race's former land was even vaster than the Prosper Plane, one of the 7 sacred planes of the Saints' world. Of course, that was just in terms of area. It did not mean that the Dark Star race in the past was stronger than the current heavenly palace of Bishing. The structures of the 2 vastly different worlds varied as well. The Spirit's world was basically completely divided into races. The entire place was carved up by a few powerful races, with many other subsidiary races below them. As a result, the Spirit's world in the past was completely divided between the peak races with Grand Exalts. It was a place completely different from the Saints' world. The Grand Exalts of the Saints' world had no desire for conquest. Even the undisputed greatest expert of the past, the war god of the God clan, had only occupied the God Enigma plane. Even with the title of greatest clan in the Saints' world, they did not interfere with the matters of other planes. The heavenly palace of Bishing only developed quietly on the Prosper Plane. They enjoyed their supreme status, but they did not conquer the entire place. At this moment, Jian Qin sensed something and suddenly looked into the distance. At the end of the wide street was a cluster of powerful presences. They formed a surging billow, sweeping out into the surroundings. A group of cultivators in similar attires slowly walked uniformly. There were over 1,000 people in total, and without any exceptions, they were all early God Kings. These people clearly belonged to an extremely powerful organization. Wherever they passed by, the surrounding cultivators would all step aside and show a sliver of fear. Even a few infinite primes would stand aside quietly when they saw the group. Jian Qin looked at the people and frowned slightly. From all the God Kings, he sensed something very off, as they definitely were not ordinary cultivators or ordinary God Kings. He could clearly sense that all of their presences were unstable. Their vitality fluctuated about, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. A portion of them even seemed like they had reached the end of their lives. they seemed lethargic. Moreover, all of the god kings had gloomy eyes and numb expressions. They gave off a heavy presence of death. They did not possess the energy that regular cultivators did. They're the sacrificial soldiers of the Wei family. Sigh, these people are all tools raised with the 100 Tribulations God King pill. They can only live for 100 years at most. The sacrificial soldiers of the Wei family have been mobilized again. There are actually more than 1,000 of them this time. What is the Wei family doing, mobilizing so many all together? These sacrificial soldiers raised with the 100 Tribulations God King pill are the deterrence trump cards of those peak organizations in the world of the fallen beast. Without them, they wouldn't be able to sustain their business in the world of the fallen beasts? Strange. Why have these large organizations sent sacrificial soldiers into the world of the fallen beast time and time again lately? Is something big going to happen in there? Many cultivators discussed quietly near the street. Jian Chen obtained a lot of information from eavesdropping. 100 Tribulations God King pill? What kind of pill is that to be able to raise so many God Kings? Jian Chen wondered. He was in great doubt. He immediately clasped his fist at a middle-aged man beside him and asked. The middle-aged man was a mid-God King. He showed a sliver of impatience. Originally, he was reluctant to pay attention to Jian Chen, but when he sensed the vague but tremendous presence Jian Chen gave off, he immediately shivered inside and answered in a hurry, "Senior, you must have come to the spirit's world recently, right? It's normal for you to not know what the 100 Tribulations God King pill is. The 100 Tribulations God King pill is a pill refined from a heavenly resource that only grows in the world of the fallen beast. The reason why it's called the 100 Tribulations God King pill is because of its unfathomable power. Even if a mortal who hasn't cultivated at all consumes it, they'll be able to reach God King in an extremely short amount of time." What? There's a pill as incredible as that? Even a mortal can reach God King in an extremely short time after ingesting it? Jian Chen was surprised. The effects of the 100 Tribulations God King pill had toppled his understanding of pills altogether. Who knows how long and how many resources it would take for a mortal to reach God King? However, he had just heard about a single pill that could elevate a mortal to God King right now. This was no longer a matter of being incredible. It was like a fairy tale. Even though the pill is utterly incredible, it comes with great consequences as well. Anyone who ingests the pill can only live for another 100 years at most. They'll definitely die after the century passes, the middle-aged man continued. A century. Even though it's just a century, it's still not enough to obscure the pill's power. A single pill is equivalent to a God King. If you have several tens of thousand, several hundreds of thousand, or even millions of them, Jian Chen was amazed. He dared not think any further. The middle-aged man smiled bitterly when he heard that. "Senior, you can't treat 100 Tribulations God King pills as invaluable as regular heavenly resources. The main material for forging them is 100 Tribulations grass. They only grow in the world of the fallen beast and is extremely valuable. Most of the time, there's none for sale. Normally, only those extremely powerful organizations have the ability to get some from the world of the fallen beast, and it won't be a lot. It's impossible to reach numbers as terrifying as what Senior mentioned. That's because if there really was so much 100 Tribulations grass, the peak sects won't necessarily have the wealth to buy it all. And even if they did, it's impossible for the world of the fallen beast to produce so much. Senior, look at the Wei family. With the tremendous strength of the Wei family, they've basically mobilized everything they have with all these sacrificial soldiers raised with the 100 Tribulations God King pill this time. Chapter 2678. A Grand Exalt's successor appears. The middle-aged man had replied to Jian Chen's questions in a rather flattering manner. He had been stunned by the primordial realm presence Jian Chen purposefully gave off, so he answered Jian Chen's questions with everything that he knew. He spoke in great detail. Jian Chen also managed to learn about a special heavenly resource that never appeared in the saints' world, the 100 Tribulations grass. A pill refined from 100 Tribulations grass could allow a mortal to become a God King. This effect was incredible, but the consequences were extremely terrifying as well. terrifying to a point where no one would be willing to take it under ordinary circumstances despite the sudden increase in cultivation. Has anything major happened in the world of the fallen beast recently? Jianshan asked. That I do not know. Though recently, those peak organizations have been constantly sending in sacrificial soldiers raised with 100 Tribulations God King pills into the world of the fallen beast. As a result, I do assume something has happened in there, the middle-aged man said carefully. Jianshan knew the middle-aged man had already surpassed 1,000 years in age, so he probably did not even know what the world of the fallen beast looked like. As a result, Jianshan did not take up any more of his time. He just tossed some supreme-grade divine crystals to the middle-aged man and left. Thank you for your reward, senior. Thank you for your reward. The middle-aged man beamed when he looked at the several hundred supreme-grade divine crystals. In the saints' world, several hundred supreme-grade divine crystals would not even attract a second glance from a god king, but every single one surprisingly valuable in the spirits' world. This was because divine crystals were not as simple as currency in the spirits' world. It had the greater use of recovering origin energy. There would be frequent battles in the spirits' world, and every battle would result in an exhaustion of origin energy. The origin energy in the spirits' world was different from the saints' world. All cultivators who came from the saints' world would struggle to absorb the origin energy here, so the only way for them to replenish their origin energy was through divine crystals. These divine crystals had all been brought over from the saints' world, as it was no longer possible to mine divine crystals in the spirits' world. The passage to the world of the fallen beast was to the very east of Darkstar City. Jianshan walked slowly, except every single step would cross a tremendous distance, so he moved with lightning speed. He arrived at the entrance very soon. The entrance had already been modified into a square. The square was extremely large and could easily hold a few tens of million people. At this moment, at least 1 million cultivators had gathered in the square. Their cultivation varied, ranging from as weak as gods to as strong as primordial realm experts. Above the square was the entrance to the world of the fallen beast. It was a huge swirl of energy that was thousands of meters across. Within it hid the power of a grand exalt, giving off shocking pulses of energy that struck fear into everyone's hearts. Cultivators would constantly pour in and out of the passageway to the world of the fallen beast. However, most of them were deities and gods. There were very few overgods and barely any god kings at all. Only those below the age of 1,000 years could use this entrance. It was extremely rare for people to reach god king within 1,000 years in the saints' world. The world of the fallen beast contained many resources that the saints' world did not possess. Some cultivators would directly rush off to the stores of large organizations as soon as they emerged from the passage and exchange what they obtained in the world of the forsaken beast for what they needed. At this moment, a chaotic prime's presence appeared. A black-robed old man shot through the air above the square. With a wave of his hand, a divine hall expanded in the air. Afterwards, its doors swung open, and a group of god kings immediately flew out. There were over 1,000 of them. Jianshan glanced past them. He could tell instantly that they had been raised by 100 Tribulations God King pills. They could only live for another 100 years. They were god kings with the shortest life expectancy. After the old man, a few other primordial realm experts flew over from afar. There were infinite primes and chaotic primes, but without any exception, all of them brought a large number of sacrificial soldiers raised with 100 Tribulations God King pills. They either carried the sacrificial soldiers in divine halls or directly led them through the air, flying over Darkstar City in a grand manner. Every single person who arrived possessed the support of a large organization and brought at least 500 or 600 god kings with them. Some even brought as much as over 1,000. Immediately, over 10,000 sacrificial god kings gathered in the square, directly stunning all the cultivators present. There are actually so many sacrificial soldiers. Heavens, what are the clans trying to do? Has an earth-shaking matter really happened in the world of the fallen beast? Discussions broke out across the giant square. Everyone's attention had been drawn away by the sacrificial soldiers. They began intense discussions. However, the primordial realm experts who had brought the sacrificial soldiers all sat down in the air and began resting. It was as if they were waiting for something. Jian Chen stopped when he saw this. He did not hurry into the world of the fallen beast. At the same time, he concealed his true cultivation, passing it off as early God King. Suddenly, a tremendous, terrifying presence blanketed the entire region. In the distance, another group of people flew over steadily. A Grand Prime. Jian Chen's heart shivered. This was the first Grand Prime he had seen since coming to the spirit's world. He could not help but look over immediately. The Grand Prime's arrival made all the primordial realm experts above the square stand up. They all bowed towards the Grand Prime due to the difference in seniority. They were extremely solemn. It's an expert of the Dire Wolf clan. What? The Dire Wolf clan? The Dire Wolf clan that obtained a Grand Exalt's legacy on a nameless planet a few years ago? That's right, that Dire Wolf clan. It said that the Grand Exalt's legacy was obtained by a nobody in the Dire Wolf clan. In the end, the junior's status rose up, and he has now become their young master. He has received the full support of the Dire Wolf clan. Jian Chen could not help but think about the lonely planet he had encountered Su Ran on in the past as he listened to their discussions. The ancient Skywolf's legacy had been discovered by him and Kaya together. If it were not for the two of them, the Dire Wolf clan would have never received such a great fortuitous encounter. Strictly speaking, he was the benefactor of the Dire Wolf clan. Kaya, Jian Chen murmured inside. As soon as he thought of Kaya, his heart ached and sorrow began to swell. The people from the Dire Wolf clan had already begun interacting with the primordial realm experts of the other large organizations. The Grand Prime of the Dire Wolf clan was an old man with fierce facial features. He pulled a young man out from behind him and introduced, "This is the young master of our Dire Wolf clan, Jin Hong. Jin Hong, these are your seniors, so why don't you greet them?" Jin Hong seemed around 20 years old, except his appearance was nothing special. No part of him stood out apart from his late God King cultivation. "Greetings to the seniors." Jin Hong clasped his fist. Even though he faced so many primordial realm experts, he did not act out of place. "Jin Hong? You must be the successor to the ancient Skywolf sovereign. You really are striking." A few primordial realm experts smiled. They did not put on any airs. Let alone the Grand Prime, just Jin Hong's identity as the successor of a Grand Exalt was enough to raise serious attention from all of them. Chapter 2679. The Heavenly Crane Clan. The identity and status of a Grand Exalt successor was enough to make all cultivators in the Saints' world envious. Even a few Grand Primes would be tempted and desire such an identity. As a result, even though Jin Hong was not powerful, just a God King, he seemed to have become the point of focus simply by standing there. He became the most dazzling figure in the surroundings. As a matter of fact, even the Grand Prime from the Dire Wolf clan who had purposefully come to escort him treated him with great importance as if he were the supreme king of the clan. "Young Master Jin Hong, I am He Chanxian. I come from the Heavenly Crane clan of the Ice Pole Plain. I have been tasked by the seniors of my clan to remain within the world of the fallen beast for an entire decade. I do hope young Master Jin Hong can watch out for me." At this moment, a captivating woman appeared before Jin Hong and spoke gently. She seemed to be around 20 years of age and was extremely beautiful, enough to enchant everyone. However, she gave off a sense of coldness that directly influenced the surroundings. It made the temperature around her suddenly plummet. Coupled with her snow-white dress, she seemed very much like a levitating ice beauty. He Chanxian had clearly cultivated the laws of ice. Due to her cultivation method, wherever she stood seemed to be transformed into a world of frost. The Ice Pole Plain? The Ice Pole Plain of the 7 sacred plains of the Saints' world? The Ice Pole Plain. That's a place watched over by the Ice Goddess. The Ice Pole Plain is completely covered by a snowy tundra, making it the ultimate holy land for those who cultivate the laws of ice. The Ice Goddess? The Ice Goddess Hall is under the control of the Moon God Hall now. It has even come to this, so why are you still talking about the Ice Goddess? The ice goddess has probably died a long time ago. What? The ice goddess hall is under the control of the moon god hall? That's impossible. The ice goddess has to be dead. Otherwise, how would the ice goddess hall fall into the hands of others? Sigh, out of the 7 grand exalts of the saints' world in the past, the war god of the god clan who ranked first fell in battle, while the space-time elder and the Enada Grand Prime who stood at equal second and third place died as well. Now, even the ice goddess hasn't managed to avoid that fate. I wonder just how many grand exalts of our saints' world still remain after that war back then. The primordial realm experts in the surroundings had only been conversing casually, but many of them immediately sighed as soon as the ice goddess was mentioned. A few of them had personally witnessed the war back then. They could not help but give out emotional sighs at a time like this and show sorrow. It's actually someone from the ice pole plane. It looks like I need to find an opportunity to come in contact with He Chanqian. I might be able to learn about some matters regarding the Ice Goddess Hall and the Moon God Hall from her. Jian Chen did not stand out at all among the crowd. He looked at He Chanqian high in the air, and the light in his eyes flickered. He was rather worried about Fairy Hao Yu. Quite some time had passed since Fairy Hao Yu left, but there was still no news of her. He wondered how she was doing. He was actually less worried about his sister, Changyang Mingyue. After all, his sister was under Protector Shui's protection, remaining hidden somewhere as she quietly recovered her strength. She was obviously much safer than Fairy Hao Yu, who had directly dove into the belly of the beast. After He Chanqian, a few more young ladies and young masters from various planes of the saints' world greeted Jin Hong. They were all extremely kind. Some of them even expressed their respect. These young masters and young ladies were all under the age of 1,000. They were all part of the promising young generation, but their strength obviously was not close to Jin Hong's. Only an extremely few of them had reached God King. Most of them were overgods. However, even with that being the case, they possessed great statuses in their respective clans. Even if reaching overgod within 1,000 years was not enough to rival supreme prodigies, they were still talented. Not to mention that several of them had made it onto the overgod's plaque. Jian Chen ceased to pay attention to the matters between the clans. He discreetly arrived before a divine hall that stood to the side of the square. The divine hall was a medium-quality god artifact. Above the main entrance was a single ancient word written boldly and powerfully, hiding the truths of the world, Heavenly Crane. This was clearly the divine hall that belonged to the Heavenly Crane clan, equivalent to a temporary resting spot on the square. Not only would it be convenient for members of the Heavenly Crane clan to enter the world of the fallen beast from here, but it also provided a safe and secretive location for the Heavenly Crane clan to purchase some heavenly resources that came out of the world of the fallen beast. There were several dozen divine halls like the Heavenly Crane clans scattered across the square. Every single one of them represented a great organization in the saints' world. Jian Chen even saw a divine hall that belonged to the Cloud's Urge Empire of the Delight Plane. The entrance to the Heavenly Crane clan's divine hall was open. 2 god kings stood at the entrance like statues. They were guards. However, these 2 god kings had already surpassed 1,000 years old. Their eyes were filled with age. Who knows how many tens of thousand years they had lived for already. They were cultivators with limited talent. There were a lot of people like them in the saints' world. They would basically remain like that for the rest of their lives if they did not come across any major fortuitous encounters. Stop. This is the base of the Heavenly Crane clan. Why have you come? As soon as Jian Chen approached the divine hall, a god king stopped him and asked emotionlessly, "I want to join the Heavenly Crane clan in order to enter the world of the fallen beast. Please pass this on for me." Jian Chen clasped his fist. At the same time, he passed some supreme-grade divine crystals to the guards secretly. Jian Chen had already understood the rules here. Many peak organizations of the saints' world had operations in the world of the fallen beast. However, due to the entry conditions being far too strict, none of the peak organizations could maneuver too much of their power out of the world of the fallen beast for the sake of their interests. As a result, they could only recruit outsiders to make up for the absence in power. The recruitment was not particularly restrictive. It was basically only effective in the spirit's world. Once these recruited people returned to the saints' world, the peak organizations would never recognize their assistance. They would only make exceptions for those who had committed deeds of great merit. The eyes of the two guards lit up as soon as they saw the supreme-grade divine crystals. They ravished in joy and immediately turned much more friendly. "Please wait, brother. I'll contact the caretaker immediately." As he said that, the senses of his soul immediately shot into the depths of the divine hall. Before long, a peak God King old man emerged from the divine hall. The old man clearly possessed quite a lot of authority here. He had grown accustomed to his power here, so he obviously developed a sense of arrogance. He stood with his hands behind his back and his chin raised high, looking down on everything. He looked down on Jianchen from above and said haughtily, "Kid, you want to join our heavenly crane clan to enter the world of the fallen beast? What's your name? Where do you come from in the saints' world? Under who did you study?" Chapter 2680. Attracting Attention. Greetings from Junior Yang Yutian. I come from no sect in the saints' world. I have always been alone, with no place tying me down, Jianchen replied with a clasped fist. He did not speak with any particular modesty or arrogance. He behaved normally, ready to adapt to whatever was thrown at him. What lies? The eyes of the old man who was dressed like a caretaker immediately turned cold. He stared at Jianchen sharply as if he wanted to see through him completely. He said icily, "You can only enter the world of the fallen beast if you are under the age of 1,000 years. You've managed to reach early God King within a millennium, yet you still say that you come from no sect? Yang Yutian, do you really think I'm that easy to fool?" The old man's glare became sharper and sharper. "If I've guessed correctly, you should be a spy sent over from some other organization. Tell me, what are you trying to achieve by sneaking into our heavenly crane clan?" A powerful presence radiated from the old man, crushed towards Jianchen with absolute might. However, he did not know that Jianchen was not an early God King. Jianchen had only made his cultivation appear at early God King as a ruse. Before a powerful primordial realm expert, the old man's mere late God King presence seemed rather laughable. However, Jianchen obviously would not expose his strength. His expression changed, and he acted like he was in agony by gritting his teeth. "Senior, you're overthinking things. The reason why I want to join the Heavenly Crane clan is only to enter the world of the fallen beast. The world of the fallen beast is extremely dangerous. If I move about in there alone, I'll definitely be doomed. I want to join the Heavenly Crane clan to work for you, as well as in hopes of receiving your clan's protection. As for my strength, let me come clean. I accidentally obtained the White River Master's legacy. The White River Master was an infinite prime. However, he passed away many years ago. The legacy and various cultivation resources he had left behind allowed me to attain my current glory. The legacy of an infinite prime can create a God King below the age of 1,000 years? Do you think I'm as easy to fool as a kid? There's no need for any doubt at all. You have to be a spy sent by some other large organization. You bear no good intentions. I'll capture you right now and interrogate you," the old man bellowed, and his hand directly reached out, approaching Jianchen with lightning speed and surging energy. He had actually used his full strength this time, completely unleashing his cultivation as a late God King. Clearly, he wanted to capture Jianchen efficiently this time. This kid is so extravagant, casually giving away over 100 supreme-grade divine crystals to guards. That means he must have even more supreme-grade divine crystals on him. But once I capture him, it'll all be mine, the caretaker thought and celebrated inside. He would not stoop as low as this in the saints' world. A few supreme-grade divine crystals were not enough for him to offend a God King. Even though it was only an early God King, some God Kings did possess many strange secret techniques even if they possessed lackluster strength. Once it came down to a desperate struggle, they could still cause some trouble. However, this was the spirit's world, which made the value of divine crystals increase by several folds. The spendthriftness that Jianchen had demonstrated was enough for him to take this risk. Jian sneered as he watched the old man's hand reach over. However, his expression did not change. He also struck out with his hand, exhibiting his cultivation at early God King. What ignorance! You're a mere early God King, yet you want to take me head-on? The caretaker sneered. Bang! However, in the next moment, something that surprised him happened. The two hands collided. In the clash between early and late God King, the caretaker did not overwhelm his opponent completely as he had imagined. Instead, he felt a great force that actually nullified all the energy in his hand. However, Jian produced a grunt and staggered backwards uncontrollably. He only stabilized himself after taking several dozen steps. His face was bright red, and it seemed like his body was shaken up. Brat, you really aren't simple. You're an early God King, yet you actually possess such terrifying battle prowess. However, do you think you really can sneak into our Heavenly Crane clan like this? You're dreaming. The caretaker was surprised. He looked at Jian as if he were a monster. However, he wanted to capture Jian even more now. He struck out once again. Energy surged from his body as he turned into a blur that shot towards Jian. He was no longer as passive as before, directly using his strongest technique to strike with lightning speed. Senior, what are you doing? I've come to join the Heavenly Crane clan. If your Heavenly Crane clan won't accept me, then so be it, but you even slander me and want to kill me. So much for being a famed peak clan. Don't you feel any embarrassment by acting like this? Jian called out sternly. He had spoken extremely loudly. His voice spread far away, attracting the attention of many people nearby. Immediately, many gazes were cast over. This immediately made the caretaker's face sink. Originally, he wanted to capture Jian quietly, then finish him off so that he could rob him of all his wealth. Even if someone brought it up in the future, he would be able to dodge the entire matter using his authority. However, he never expected Jian to make a scene, making the Heavenly Crane clan's divine hall the center of attention in the square. With that, a matter that should have been insignificant might develop uncontrollably. God damn it! The caretaker cursed inside. With a flip of his hand, a snow-white feather fan appeared in his hand. The fan was made from the feathers of heavenly cranes, giving off a bone-chilling coldness. The caretaker swung the fan at Jian. Frigid winds immediately began to billow through the surroundings, creating a stream of coldness that drifted towards Jian as if it could freeze space. Stop! At this moment, an old and dignified voice rang out. With the voice, the cold wind from the caretaker's fan seemed to encounter a terrifyingly hot sun, immediately vanishing. Two figures appeared above the divine hall. One of them was a gray-haired old woman. Her face was covered with wrinkles, but she seemed dignified. She gave off the terrifying presence of a chaotic prime. The other person was He Qian of the Heaven Crane clan. Greetings to the Great Elder. Greeting to Miss Qian. The caretaker's face immediately changed drastically when he saw the two of them. He dropped to his knees in great fear. The chaotic prime Great Elder said nothing. However, He Qian glanced past the caretaker and Jian. She asked indifferently, "What happened here? Why is there so much ruckus?" Miss Qian, this person is a spy. He wants to sneak into our Heavenly Crane clan, but I've exposed him. Chapter 2681. He Qian's attempt. Greetings, Miss Qian. I am Yang Yutian, an independent cultivator. I've specially come to join your Heavenly Crane clan to enter the world of the fallen beast. I'll be able to offer up some support to your Heavenly Crane clan, and I'll also be able to spare your Heavenly Crane clan from much of the strenuous effort. I'm not a spy. Before the caretaker could finish speaking, Jian interrupted him without any hesitation. He completely ignored the ugliness of the old man's face. A late God King was simply far too weak in his eyes, so weak that they were equivalent to ants. He did not even have to use his hands, as just the intent from his ultimate way of the sword would be enough to kill any God King with the slightest thought. Don't you dare! You have no right to speak before Miss Qian and the Great Elder. Why don't you shut up? Said the caretaker forcefully. His expression was ugly. You have repeatedly accused me of being a spy. Now that Miss Qian and the Great Elder are here, I obviously have to clear the entire matter up. The Heavenly Crane clan is a famed, peak clan within the Saints' world. I do believe that Miss Qian and the Great Elder can get to the bottom of this entire matter, unlike some other people who would take such laughable actions just for some divine crystals on me, Jian Chen said righteously. This was the first time he had ever met this caretaker, yet the caretaker had specifically targeted him like this. As a result, he had roughly guessed his intentions. The caretaker had probably seen him hand divine crystals to the two guards, which made him believe that there were a lot of divine crystals on him, making the caretaker want to take them for himself. If he really were a regular early god king, the caretaker might have succeeded already. Unfortunately, the person he encountered was Jian Chen. How dare you spew lies and slander me? The caretaker's face was completely sunken. He looked at Jian Chen, and killing intent surged in his eyes. He Qianqian frowned. She looked back and forth between Jian Chen and the caretaker and said, "Caretaker Su, tell me, what evidence do you have that indicates Yang Yutian is a spy from another organization? The Great Elder is right here, so don't lie anymore. You know what the consequences of the crime of misleading a Great Elder is." He Qianqian's merciless reply immediately made the caretaker turn pale. He utterly hated Jian Chen now. However, he knew that not only would everything right now have a direct influence over his future, but it could even touch upon his life. This was all because his prior actions had already disgraced the Heavenly Crane clan, dealing a blow to their reputation. He was a completely insignificant figure within the Heavenly Crane clan, while the Heavenly Crane clan was a peak clan in the Saints' world. The stronger an organization, the more they cared about their reputation. If someone like him openly damaged the Heavenly Crane clan's reputation, the clan would never let him off lightly. As a result, he could only say reluctantly, "Great Elder, Yang Yutian claims that he comes from no sect or organization and managed to reach God King within 1,000 years through the legacy of a single infinite prime. In my opinion, that alone is enough to raise doubts. Any single person who can reach God King within 1,000 years in the Saints' world are prodigies from large clans or organizations and have received guidance from great experts. Even if it is through a legacy, it should be through an extremely impressive legacy, not a mere infinite primes. As a result, I'm extremely certain that Yang Yutian is a spy from another organization, wanting to infiltrate our clan for some secret reason." The caretaker was rather clever. He knew an explanation like this would only result in the conclusion of him making an incorrect judgment due to limited ability at most, not damaging the Heavenly Crane clan's reputation. "This kid sure is impressive to reach early God King within 1,000 years, said the Great Elder of the Heavenly Crane clan. She spoke very indifferently, but the compliment was all that she said. "Qianqian, you handle the matters here." Throwing that out there, the Great Elder flashed and disappeared into the Divine Hall. It was as if she could not be bothered with the insignificant matters there. With the Great Elder's departure, the pressure that Caretaker Su was under immediately plummeted. As long as the Great Elder did not investigate the matter, he could basically reduce the entire incident into a minor one. He Qianqian bowed towards the Great Elder as she departed before revealing a cold expression. She stared at the caretaker and inquired, "Just because Yang Yutian reached God King within 1,000 years, you decided to handle him as a spy despite the lack of any solid evidence backing it up? Caretaker Su, is this how you handle matters?" "Miss Qian, enough, don't say anything more." "Caretaker Su, I think it's best if someone with greater ability replaces you. If you continue to hold this position, we'll probably lose all the talents that originally wanted to join our Heavenly Crane clan." A single sentence from He Qianqian had determined Caretaker Su's fate. He had just lost the tiny amount of privilege he could wield. He Qianqian did not even take a second glance at the pale Caretaker Su. She directly made her way to the Divine Hall and brushed past Jian Chen. "Yang Yutian, come in with me." "Yes, Miss Qian." Jian Chen was not surprised by this result. He followed He Qianqian into the Divine Hall calmly. Within a majestic hall, Jian Chen and He Qianqian stood facing each other. He Qianqian gave off a frigid presence, which made the entire place abnormally cold. She stared straight at Jianchen with her beautiful eyes and asked sternly, "Yang Yutian, do you really plan on joining our Heavenly Crane clan, to become a part of our clan? Or do you only want to join the group that our Heavenly Crane clan is sending into the world of the fallen beast?" "Miss Qian, I've come to enter the world of the fallen beast, so I obviously want to join the group. In the world of the fallen beast, I'll stand on the same line as the Heavenly Crane clan, but outside, I will have nothing to do with the Heavenly Crane clan," Jianchen said without a second thought. "Yang Yutian, with the talent that you've exhibited, it's enough for you to become a true member of our Heavenly Crane clan. Have you not considered that?" He Qianqian asked. Her eyes twinkled as she stared right at Jianchen. She was attempting to win him over. Across the saints' world, only a select few people could reach God King within a millennium. Every single one of them was a prodigy, a talent that clans could never get enough of. They were enough to be heavily favored by peak organizations, so He Qianqian obviously would not give up on him. If she successfully recruited a talent like him, it would be quite the contribution to her clan. Chapter 2682. An enormous group. Jianchen knew that when He Qianqian asked him to join the Heavenly Crane clan this time, she was not inviting him to accompany her group temporarily. Instead, it was an invitation to truly become a member of the Heavenly Crane clan. However, Jianchen had no interest in the Heavenly Crane clan. He wanted to join their group to enter the world of the fallen beast, to get close to her and slowly learn about the situation on the ice pole plane from her. What he wanted to learn about was connected to matters that were far too great. It was not as simple as just Fairy Hao Yu. It involved the person behind the moon god hall where Fairy Hao Yu used to reside, Nanpatin, and the even more terrifying peak expert behind Nanpatin, the Flame Reverend. Nanpatin and the Flame Reverend were both dangerous figures who threatened his sister, Changyang Mingyue. As a result, for the sake of her safety, he needed to be careful. The Flame Reverend was just far too terrifying. He was a vicious person who even dared to ambush the État Grand Exalt. Someone like that would obviously be extremely skilled at peering into the heavenly secrets, so Jianchen needed to handle any and all matters regarding the polar ice plane with extreme caution. He was afraid of leaving behind even the slightest trace, which would allow someone as powerful as the Flame Reverend to uncover everything. As a result, Jianchen dared not ask about the polar ice plane directly, much less visit any information brokers. What he wanted to know touched on great secrets, so careless investigation would instead attract the attention on those with malicious intent. For the sake of his sister's safety, he did not dare to take any risk. As a result, Jianchen declined He Qianqian's invitation without a second thought. As she looked at Jianchen's determined expression, He Qianqian understood that winning him over was no longer possible. She could not help but become slightly disappointed. "If that is the case, I won't force you to do anything. Our Heavenly Crane clan will be entering the world of the fallen beast with many other peak organizations from the Saints' world in 3 days' time. We will be led by the young master of the Dire Wolf clan this time. All the organizations and clans need to cooperate with each other, so go prepare. The world of the fallen beast isn't very peaceful right now. Danger has multiplied, so you need to be ready for bloodshed." He Qianqian treated Jianchen slightly colder now, no longer behaving as enthusiastic as before. She could not even be bothered to add anything else unnecessary. She turned around and left without even looking back after that. Jianchen did not mind. He Qianqian would be entering the world of the fallen beast anyway. Coupled with the unrest in there, he believed that he would have many opportunities to come in touch with her. As a result, he was in no hurry to ask He Qianqian about the polar ice plane. He would wait until they entered the world of the fallen beast. Afterwards, Jianchen was taken to the resting quarters by a guard. The region was an extremely special place in the Divine Hall because there was nothing there aside from closely packed rooms. It was slightly dark in there. The decor was simple and it was quiet. The many rooms were arranged in an orderly manner, numbering as many as over 10,000. This is the card to your room. There's a number of there, which records the place where you can temporarily stay in. Go to your room with your card. Don't blame me for not warning you. This is the Divine Hall of the Heavenly Crane clan. The artifact spirit is in control of everything here at all times. If you decide to make trouble here, or if you set foot in places where you don't belong, the artifact spirit will kill you without any mercy, the guard who led the way for Jianchen said coldly. Then he passed a jade card to him before leaving. Jianchen looked at the many rooms. He could vaguely sense the presences of godhood cultivators from each room. Most of them were gods, with only a few over-gods. There was not a single god king. He had already guessed that these people had probably been recruited by the Heavenly Crane clan just like himself. These cultivators would supplement their forces that would be entering the world of the fallen beast. All of these cultivators remained in their rooms and cultivated in seclusion, adjusting their conditions. None of them wandered about. Jianchen looked at the card and found his room quickly in the very depths of the resting quarters. Perhaps due to being a god king, the room he was allocated to was clearly much larger. In the following 3 days, Jianchen also remained locked up in his own room. He devoted himself to comprehending the way of the sword. He was very skilled, having comprehended many laws, but with his current battle prowess, any breakthroughs in the other laws would bring about no significant increase to his battle prowess. Only with a breakthrough in the laws of the sword would he be able to reach a whole new level. So far, his laws of the sword remained at the minor achievement of Sword Immortal. Once he broke through and reached partial achievement, not only would his laws of the sword attain a new caliber, his chaotic body would be affected as well. He would be able to reach the 15th layer of the chaotic body. I obtained the fleshly core of the Dark Gold Ape King, Gusta. The energy hidden within it is so terrifying that I can easily break through with my chaotic body if I reach partial achievement with my way of the sword. As a matter of fact, I won't even use up all the energy in there by breaking through to the 15th layer. The energy is so immense that it can easily provide me with enough energy to reach the 16th layer, thought Jianchen. In recent years, he had constantly been making progress after he reached Sword Immortal. Even though it was not enough for him to reach partial achievement, it did push him along, making constant progress to partial achievement. As a result, Jianchen's current way of the sword was much more powerful than when he broke through in the Sword God Mountains. His comprehension was much deeper as well. The 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. The artifact spirit of the Divine Hall alerted everyone. Jianchen then felt a powerful energy from the Divine Hall, and in the next moment, he had been sent outside. The people sent out with him included the other cultivators who had been recruited by the Heavenly Crane clan. They had also been cultivating in the Divine Hall. Time's up. Get ready to set off. This time, I will personally lead you all into the world of the fallen beast. He Qian appeared in the air. She was stern, and she gave off an icy cold presence. Her bearing was lofty and cold, almost unapproachable. She only gave a simple reminder about a few matters to be careful about before leading the several thousand cultivators into the center of the square in a grandiose manner. They hovered in the air below the entrance to the world of the fallen beast. The entrance had been completely taken over by the peak clans and organizations of the Saints' world right now, temporarily obstructing any other cultivator from entering. Several hundreds of thousands of people were gathered below it. These people were all split into several dozen groups. They all occupied a region, quietly hovering below the entrance. The several thousand cultivators led by He Qian seemed completely inconspicuous among the several dozen groups. Chapter 2683. Within the world of the fallen beast, Jianchen looked at the several 100,000 cultivators below the age of 1,000 within the crowd. He could not help but shake his head secretly. Clearly, he did not place any high hopes on them. If the sacrificial soldiers raised through 100 tribulations God King pills are ignored, less than 1/100th of the people here are actual God Kings. Before the Dark Star race that rules over the world of the fallen beast, they're no different from ants, thought Jianchen. Although he had yet to enter the world of the fallen beast, the heartless child's information allowed him to roughly understand the situation there. As a matter of fact, the Dark Star Emperor alone was enough to easily slaughter everyone, let alone the other unaccounted for factors. The Dark Star Emperor was a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime with supreme talent. His battle prowess was great enough to rival chaotic primes. Before such an expert, even Jianchen did not feel completely confident about victory, let alone God Kings. It seems like it won't be easy to save Sacred Feather this time. The other experts of the Dark Star race aren't really a problem. It's just that I have no confidence against the Dark Star Emperor. Jianchen did not feel particularly optimistic. He could not bring any god artifacts or treasures on par with the god tier into the world of the fallen beast. Without the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, his battle prowess would decrease. With the Dark Star Emperor's battle prowess, it would be a difficult battle even in his peak condition, let alone his current weakened state. The difference between their strength had only grown wider. Just as Jianchen pondered about all this, the young master of the Dire Wolf clan, Jin Hong, appeared. He wore gray robes and kept his presence completely concealed. He followed the Grand Prime of the Dire Wolf clan quietly. He seemed to be maintaining a very low profile. However, no matter how well he hid himself, he still could not avoid the fate of being the center of attention here. No one paid attention to the Grand Prime of the Dire Wolf clan. Instead, all of the cultivators present were fixated on him. He simply stood out too much as the successor of a Grand Exalt. In the eyes of some, such a status was even greater than a Grand Prime's. Grand Primes stood at the apex and were rarely seen by regular cultivators, but every single peak organization in the Saints' world would have one or more. As a result, they were not exactly special. On the other hand, the number of Grand Exalt successors could be counted on 10 fingers. They were basically mythical. As a result, Jin Hong was as dazzling as the midday sun just by standing there. Jin Hong's appearance also meant that all the organizations taking part in the expedition this time had arrived. The many organizations began to enter the world of the fallen beast in an orderly fashion. Very soon, it was the Heavenly Crane clan's turn. The several hundred sacrificial soldiers and several thousand recruited cultivators all vanished into the tunnel under He Qianqian's lead. As soon as he entered the tunnel, Jianchen felt a power so terrifying that it irresistibly restricted his movements. This power was just too vast, just too terrifying. It was no longer possible to tell whether it belonged to the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race or the Wood Spirits, or the world of the fallen beast itself. Wrapped by the power, Jianchen felt like he crossed through a distant space and time. He lost all senses over the flow of time, so he had no idea how much time had passed. It seemed like a few days, but it also felt like a few years. In the end, the power around him trembled, and he had appeared in a gloomy world. He looked around and discovered that he was standing in a forested region. Above him was the exit to the world of the fallen beast. It seemed exactly the same as the entrance above Darkstar City. It was also an extremely large energy vortex. Jianchen could not see any celestial bodies within the gloomy world. However, he saw a huge barrier that stood 100 kilometers away. The barrier enveloped the exit as a hemisphere. It acted as a powerful defense. There was a thick, gray mist outside. He could vaguely make out mountains. Jianchen had already expanded the senses of his soul silently. Since it was the senses from a primordial realm expert, coupled with his concealment, no one present discovered it. However, when the senses of his soul came into contact with the barrier, it was blocked. This barrier was cast down by a primordial realm expert. Although I can force the senses of my soul through it, doing so would definitely create quite the disturbance, thought Jianchen. According to his knowledge, only the people of the Darkstar race could cast down such a powerful barrier here. Jianchen's surroundings became packed very soon. The presences of godhood experts merged together, forming something akin to an ocean. It was tremendous. Everyone taking part in the expedition had gathered here. The sacrificial soldiers and many cultivators all stood in their own smaller groups. All gather. Don't wander about. At this moment, several loud shouts rang out. The leaders of each organization ordered their people. These leaders included He Qianqian. People of the Heavenly Crane clan, enter the Divine Hall. I'll be taking you to 100 Saint City via a teleportation formation. A Divine Hall appeared in He Qianqian's hands. The Divine Hall was not a god artifact but a supreme quality saint artifact. However, it was extremely close to being a low-quality god artifact. It could even be described as a quasi-god artifact. At the same time, the leaders of the other organizations also took out supreme quality saint artifacts to take away their people. The teleportation formation they would be taking had limited capacity. It could not transport as many people as the tunnel into the world of the fallen beast. Hence, they had to minimize the people outside if they wanted to reach 100 Saints City quickly. The large-scale teleportation formation there originally shone with dazzling light and pulsed with power. However, just when everyone was about to enter the divine halls, it rapidly dimmed. Very soon, it fell silent completely. It was without any energy at all. The sudden changes with the teleportation formation made all the leaders frown. Immediately, they sent people to investigate. Oh no, the connection has been broken. There's nothing wrong with the teleportation formation here. It must be the one in 100 Saint City, the investigating person said with an ugly frown. Something must have happened to 100 Saint City. Young Master Jin Hong, I would advise you to change the teleportation destination immediately to an alternative, a leader suggested to Jin Hong. All the leaders had been told to obey Jin Hong with regard to everything during the expedition in the world of the fallen beast this time. As a result, they would all ask for Jin Hong's opinion if they wanted to do anything major. Jin Hong nodded, agreeing to the suggestion. Very soon, the teleportation formation was adjusted and set to another destination. However, the faces of the people responsible for adjusting the formation all sank completely. There's bad news. The other teleportation formation is not responding either. It's the same problem, someone reported. With that, everyone's faces became warped. We have a few other alternatives. Let's adjust the destination again. The teleportation formation was adjusted several times, but the end result was chilling. They discovered that all the teleportation formations in the world of the fallen beast, no matter how well hidden they were, had suffered problems. They could not teleport to those places. The teleportation formations had to be connected on both ends to function. Once something happened to one end, it would cease to function, so teleportation obviously became impossible. God damn it, it must be the Dark Star race. Apart from the one in 100 Saint City, the teleportation formations we've cast down are all extremely obscure. Only the Dark Star race has the ability to sniff them all out in the world of the fallen beast. It's troublesome now. How will we go to 100 Saint City without a teleportation formation? Do we have crossed through the Twin World Mountains? As soon as the two World Mountains were mentioned, many of the leaders fell silent. They became very solemn. Some of them even paled in fright. Chapter 2684. The two World Mountains. Jianchen became curious when he heard the surrounding discussion. He arrived before He Qianqian and asked, Miss Qian, what are the two World Mountains? Are they very frightening? Do you see those mountains outside the barrier? Those are the two World Mountains. No, strictly speaking, we're standing in the two World Mountains right now. Whether it be to the Dark Star race or us outsiders, the two World Mountains is a forbidden region for us to set foot in, as many life-devouring beasts live here. It's rumored that the life-devouring beasts originate from the power that the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirits had left behind. Each life-devouring beast possesses tremendous vitality. Even if it receives the most fatal of attacks, it can recover immediately through its tremendous vitality, making them almost impossible to kill. Not only do they have great vitality, but they can also devour life force. Once someone is injured by a life-devouring beast, the life-devouring beast will devour a portion of their life force. This will happen even if it were just a moment of contact. And that's when there isn't a great disparity in strength. If the difference in strength is far too great, life-devouring beasts can even suck away all the life force of a cultivator from afar, He Qianqian said sternly. Fear appeared in her icy cold eyes. If we can't use the teleportation formations, are we forced to cross through the two World Mountains? Jianchen continued to ask. That's right, there are only two paths from here, or returning to the Spirit's world. However, as all of our great organizations have sent such huge contingents, they will never accept us returning in failure. He Qianqian's voice clearly became grim. She understood the horror of the Two World Mountains very well. Without primordial realm experts, the Two World Mountains were basically hell. Moreover, even if a primordial realm expert could set foot here, they would still likely be doomed within the Two World Mountains. That was because most people who could reach the primordial realm within 1,000 years were early infinite primes. The Two World Mountains were a place that could threaten late infinite primes. Afterwards, Jian Chen asked a little more regarding the mountains and gradually gained a clearer grasp of it. He knew that there were at least several infinite prime life-devouring beasts in the Two World Mountains. The strongest would be the life-devouring Beast King. It was so powerful that even the Emperor of the Dark Star race could not slay it. As a matter of fact, it could even fend off the Emperor of the Dark Star race. The Emperor of the Dark Star race was a supreme figure on par with chaotic primes in battle. Even someone like that could not kill the life-devouring Beast King, which only made it evident just how terrifying it was. Life-devouring beasts are actually so powerful, so wouldn't we be in great danger by staying here? The barrier is powerful, but it can't stop those stronger life-devouring beasts, a cultivator asked with a pale face from the Heavenly Crane Clan's group. Don't worry. As long as we stay within the barrier, we won't be in any danger. Although our saint's world paid an astronomical price for an infinite prime of the Dark Star race to cast down this barrier, its purpose is not to fend off the life-devouring beasts, as they can't approach this place. The power of the world of the fallen beast is extremely dense near the exit, and the life-devouring beasts fear the presence of this power very much, said He Qianqian. With that, everyone finally eased up a little. At least they knew that the life-devouring beasts would not be able to threaten them right now, even if they were terrifying. No one had come close to expecting such developments. The malfunctioning teleportation formation had trapped everyone here. Although they could leave, they would be returning with failure. They would never be able to raise their heads in their clans again. They would become the jokes among their generation, and even their futures would be affected drastically. However, if they tried to pass through the Two World Mountains, they could end up staying here forever. The descendants and disciples of the several dozen peak organizations from the Saints' world were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Afterwards, Jin Hong gathered the leaders of all the organizations and discussed their plans together. In the end, they came up with a decision that was infuriating, but they were helpless about it. They decided to wait. Including the sacrificial soldiers raised through 100 tribulations God King pills, several 100,000 godhood cultivators all waited quietly within the barrier, hoping that the teleportation formation would be repaired as soon as possible. Jian Chen also sat on the floor, resting with his eyes closed. He did not try to stand out. However, he did understand that the waiting would lead to nothing. With the failure of several teleportation formations, this was clearly a planned event. There was almost no chance that the teleportation formations would be repaired. The wait lasted for a month. A month later, many people lost their patience. Some of them had as much time as they wanted, so they did not care. However, the sacrificial soldiers did not. They could only live for 100 years at most. Once the century elapsed, all of them would be dead. The sacrificial soldiers were the greatest force under their control. Without them, they would be able to do nothing here. Some people suggested returning to the spirit's world, while others boldly suggested traveling through the Two World Mountains. The several dozen leaders descended into an endless argument. Is your 100-battle clan really that fearful of death? It's just the Two World Mountains. What is so scary about it that it has made you frightened like this? What is the point of saying all this? Why don't your Greenfields clans stop hiding in the barrier then and step into the Two World Mountains? I would like to see if any of you return alive. After several consecutive days of bickering, Jian Chen became rather impatient as well. He said to He Qianqian, "We can't just keep waiting like this. Miss Qian, may I ask if you have the courage to cross the Two World Mountains with me?" Cross the Two World Mountains with you? Where did this kid come from, to be ignorant to the point of even wanting to cross the Two World Mountains? Do you really think you can do whatever you want in the world of the fallen beast just because you're a god king? What a reckless kid. He Qianqian said nothing. Instead, a young man in yellow walked over and mocked Jianchen. Jianchen knew this young man. He was also the leader of a peak organization, reaching God King under the age of 1,000. He would always go looking for He Qianqian when he had nothing better to do. He was one of her courtiers. The young man did not take Jianchen seriously at all. Even though Jianchen was also a God King, he had no background. His talent was outstanding, but he was no different from a servant in the young man's eyes. He directly made his way over to He Qianqian. Qianqian, you've seen it all as well. None of us have anticipated the developments here. I've already agreed with over a dozen other organizations to wait here for 3 more years. If the teleportation formation doesn't start up again during those 3 years, we'll back out of here. You could stick with us. He Qianqian shook her head. If we just back out like this, our Heavenly Crane clan status will plummet, and we'll never be able to raise our heads again. I would rather die here than have that happen. At the very least, we would have died for our clans by falling in battle here. We won't disgrace our clans. To live is always better than dying. Qianqian, don't think like that. You need to survive first. Only then is there any possibility for something to happen. The young man did his best to convince her. Enough. Chu Jie, don't say anything else. Although I, He Qianqian, fear the life-devouring beasts, I don't fear death, He Qianqian said firmly. Sigh. Then do whatever you want. Chu Jie sighed gently and left in pity. Miss Qian, since you've already made up your mind, let's set off now, said Jianchen. He Qianqian glanced at Jianchen coldly. Yang Yutian, you must remember that you are crossing the 2 world mountains with me, not me with you. I hope you watch your mouth next time. You may be a God King, but you still have to bear in mind who's in charge. All right, Miss Qian, Jianchen smiled slightly. He did not mind He Qianqian's attitude at all. He Qianqian's gaze suddenly sharpened. She looked at the hazy mountains and suddenly became extremely determined. Just our Heavenly Crane clan won't be powerful enough to cross the 2 world mountains. We need to gather even more strength. Chapter 2685. Setting off. Jianchen smiled gently. The supreme prodigies here all experienced fear as soon as the life-devouring beasts were mentioned. They are frightened by them, yet Miss Qian chooses to advance courageously, opting to face the life-devouring beasts by entering the 2 world mountains. Just that courage and boldness alone is enough to determine that Miss Qian's future will be exceptional. He Qianqian looked at Jianchen. Her eyes, cold enough to form a layer of frost, were slightly surprised. Yang Yutian, you're rather bold as well. I don't see any fear or dread in your eyes at all. I wonder why you are so fearless, or what kind of trump card you are hiding that makes you so unafraid of the life-devouring beasts. He Qianqian continued, if you are ignorant of the strength and danger that the life-devouring beasts pose, then I must warn you. We may have several 100,000 people here, including many god kings and sacrificial soldiers, but in the eyes of the life-devouring beasts, we are only a slightly larger ant. If we unfortunately come across a primordial realm life-devouring beast, we will probably be annihilated. Of course, if you really are relying on a hidden trump card, I still must warn you that you better off take things seriously. Life-devouring beasts are far more troublesome than you imagine them to be. Do you really think that whatever you're hiding is stronger than us, the outstanding descendants and disciples of various peak organizations across the Saints' world who have practiced the greater cultivation methods and battle skills? There was a hint of disdain in He Qianqian's voice. She was slightly haughty. Her disdain was not directed towards Jianchen's strength. Since he could reach God King within 1,000 years, his talent was already no worse than her own. What really made He Qianqian take Jianchen lightly was his background. He Qianqian did not say much to Jianchen. After a solemn warning, she directly went to discuss with the leaders of the other organizations. As he watched He Qianqian travel into the distance, the corner of Jianchen's lips curled up slightly, turning into a gentle smile. What? Qianqian, you're mad. You actually want to cross the 2 world mountains? He Qianqian, calm down. You have no idea how terrifying the mountains are. You mustn't act recklessly. He Qianqian, The danger in the Two-World Mountains exceeds anything that you can imagine. You must not set foot in there. Very soon, a series of cries rang out from nearby, followed by the mixed sound of argument. Many leaders did their best to try and convince He Qianqian. Even more people stood there with warped expressions, looking at He Qianqian with hostility. These people were all reluctant to set foot in the Two-World Mountains. They had always tried to convince everyone else in Jinhong so that everyone would return with them. If they all left together, they would have plenty of excuses to avoid the blame even if they had failed the missions from their clans. However, if a portion of them chose to cross the Two-World Mountains while they chose to retreat like cowards, they would become disgraces. As a result, He Qianqian's suggestion of crossing the Two-World Mountains led to hostility from some people. I've already made up my mind. Please set off with me if you are willing to cross the Two-World Mountains with our Heavenly Crane clan. If you don't want to, I won't force you to do anything. He Qianqian looked around at the people around her and said loudly. At that moment, she seemed like a female hero, completely fearless of death. Many people's faces warped. They looked at one another, stuck between a rock and a hard place. The Heavenly Crane clan sure has produced a person of talent. He Qianqian, I admire your courage. I, Sun Ji, am willing to lead our Sun clan with you. Isn't it just the Two-World Mountains? If this was the Saints' world, any single great elder from our Sun clan could flatten the entire place. What's there to be afraid of? Said a middle-aged man boldly. There are so many men here, yet we can't even match up to a woman like He Qianqian? If this makes it out, wouldn't you all become laughingstocks? He Qianqian, our man family will attempt to cross the Two-World Mountains with you. Don't forget our Empire Lotus Sword sect. The Two-World Mountains can't stop us. The sword in my hand has always wanted to taste the blood of life-devouring beasts. There were the cowardly and there were the courageous. Immediately, some people stepped forward while uttering bold and courageous words, standing together with He Qianqian. Powerful battle intent smoldered within their eyes. They were ready to face the life-devouring beasts of the Two-World Mountains. Enough! Stop arguing! At this moment, a voice rang out, cutting through all the ruckus like a bolt of thunder. The powerful sound wave crushed the vegetation in the surroundings to dust. A few of the weaker godhood cultivators were deafened as the voice roared through their ears. Even the souls of the god kings shook before the powerful sound wave. The divided groups immediately quietened down to the point where even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone looked in the same direction in shock and fear. The person who had spoken was Jinhong. He had maintained an extremely low profile. Even though he was the young master of the Dire Wolf clan and the successor of a Grand Exalt, he did not possess the haughtiness of the supreme prodigies there who were shrouded in light. As a result, even though he was technically the leader of the entire operation, he did not stand out among the crowd at all. He rarely spoke as well, making it very easy to ignore him. What a penetrative force! Even with my cultivation, I was stunned by Jinhong's voice. Jinhong is much more powerful than I imagined him to be. He really is the successor of a Grand Exalt after all. The various prodigies were silently shocked. Even though they knew Jinhong was the successor of a Grand Exalt, none of them had witnessed him fight, so they obviously had no idea about his strength. They all knew they had only seen the tip of the iceberg after that bellow. Young Master Jinhong, our great elders have specially told us that we are to follow you this time. May I ask what young Master Jinhong is thinking? Said a supreme prodigy. Jinhong looked around. He was extremely calm and said, all of us will cross the Two-World Mountains. No one will stay here. Of course, if there is any person who wishes to return to the spirit's world, I won't stop you. However, I will send people to announce how you have deserted us and let everyone know how incompetent you are. Jinhong did not say much, but just those words alone made some of the fearful leaders change in expression. They were filled with resentment towards Jinhong now. You bastard! Jinhong, how vicious of you! The expression of Chujia, who had mocked Jianchen earlier, darkened. Jinhong's words at the end had cut off all of their paths of retreat. Let's not waste time and set off right now. We have to reach 100 Saint City as quickly as possible. With his mind made up, Jin Hong acted swiftly. He immediately gathered everyone and set off towards the area beyond the barrier. Chapter 2686. At a complete advantage, none of the leaders dared to object to Jin Hong's orders. That was not only because of his status as the successor of a Grand Exalt. More importantly, it was because they had received orders from their seniors to follow all of Jin Hong's arrangements during this expedition to the world of the fallen beast. The several 100,000 people began to move. They determined the direction and slowly approached the barrier 100 kilometers away. The power of the world of the fallen beast was the strongest within the barrier. As a result, the life-devouring beasts would never dare to come close. However, the power of the world would become thin outside the barrier. That would be the territory of the life-devouring beasts, which would throw the group into constant danger. Even though everyone was a godhood cultivator and could cross 100 kilometers in the blink of an eye, the distance seemed extremely long right now. Especially when they grew closer and closer to the barrier, some of the prodigies from peak organizations could not help but tremble. Their fear towards the life-devouring beasts had already flooded their minds, causing them to move more and more slowly the closer they were to the barrier. Oi, you clans, keep up with the pace. If you fall behind, you might get annihilated when you face the life-devouring beasts with your strength alone. A god king at the front looked back at the few large groups that had almost fallen behind the majority completely and immediately laughed aloud. Derision appeared in his eyes when he saw the pale faces of the leaders of the groups. Out of the several dozen leaders, some of them had emerged through blood and death, having undergone devastating trials. They had forged a steel-like willpower, so entering the two-world mountains obviously did not frighten them. However, there were also those who were like snowflakes. Through the abundant resources of their clans, they had reached God King in an extremely short amount of time, but they rarely came close to death through trials and tribulations. Now that they were here, facing the threat of the life-devouring beasts, they were obviously scared witless. What the hell was the great elder thinking, making me follow all of Jin Hong's orders? Our Lance Empire is an everlasting empire that has existed since the times of antiquity after all. I'm a mighty prince of the Lance Empire with brilliant talent. I reached God King in just 800 years, and my future accomplishments will be immeasurable, so why must I lay down my life with Jin Hong of the Dire Wolf clan now? Jin Hong, you actually forced me into this. I'll never spare you. Does Jin Hong really think he's invincible after obtaining a Grand Exalt's legacy, that he can cross the two-world mountains? He probably hasn't witnessed the horror of life-devouring beasts before. I would like to see how he dies. We should be careful. Once we leave the barrier and come across life-devouring beasts, leave Jin Hong to stop them. He thinks he's so great with his legacy from a Grand Exalt. He'll get what he has been asking for soon. Remember, do not face the life-devouring beasts head-on when you come across them. Let Jin Hong stop them. Once Jin Hong dies, we'll retreat back into the barrier immediately and return to the spirit's world. Many of the leaders came up with plans. The light in their eyes all flickered as they stared at Jin Hong at the very front. They gritted their teeth in resentment, but they dared not show it. Once we leave the barrier, we'll be in the territory of the life-devouring beasts. We'll face the danger of attacks at all times. Yang Yutian, you must stick close to me later on. Don't lose your life here. He Qianqian communicated with Jian Chen sternly in the Heavenly Crane Clan's group. Excluding the sacrificial soldiers, Jian Chen was the only God King aside from He Qianqian within the Heavenly Crane Clan's group. As a result, He Qianqian clearly attached great importance to Jian Chen. Everyone arrived before the barrier very quickly. Hovering before it, Jin Hong glanced past the mountains outside. He showed no fear, directly stepping through it. After him were the people from the Dire Wolf clan, ranging close to 10,000 in number. Following them were the Sun family, Man family, Empire Lotus Sword sect, and around another dozen leaders. They crossed through the barrier fearlessly with the people under them as well. They all gave off vigorous battle intent, clearly ready to enter a bloodbath with the life-devouring beasts. Let's go! He Qian called out and crossed through the barrier with her group as well. Close to half of the entire group remained within the barrier. They gazed at the mountains shrouded by gray mist fearfully. They hesitated about stepping through the barrier. Just the life-devouring beasts have frightened you so much. Cowards like you lot should stay in your respective families obediently and live out the rest of your lives easily. You have no right to set foot in the world of the fallen beast. A prodigy outside the barrier looked at the frightened people inside and snickered fearlessly. Isn't that the prodigy of the Chu family, Chu Jie? You're not injured, are you? Why have you become so pale? And your legs, why are they trembling? You're a god king for God's sake. Can't you even stand properly? Added another prodigy. He stared at Chu Jie and ridiculed him. He was the prodigy of the Hai family, Hai Gi. The Hai family and Chu family had past grievances, so now that the opportunity to ridicule Chu Jie had presented itself, he obviously could not let it slip. Hai Gi, I'll let your arrogance slide for now. I would like to see how you die when the life-devouring beasts come, Chu Jie said in resentment. Faced with Hai Gi's mockery, he could only cross through the barrier reluctantly. Soon, the other prodigies inside the barrier could not endure the insults either after hesitating for a while. Faced with various pressures, they all crossed through the barrier. All the prodigies who had come to the world of the fallen beast had left the barrier now. They stood within the two-world mountains dominated by life-devouring beasts. Oh no! The senses of my soul are suppressed. What is this power? My senses are less than 1/100th of their usual capacity. A cry rang out. The senses of my soul are suppressed as well. God damn it, I can only expand my senses to a range of 10 kilometers. The senses of my soul are completely useless. It has been firmly locked within me. Jian Chun frowned in response to all these cries. He immediately expanded the senses of his soul as well and discovered that even though they were affected, he could still reach a range of 1,000,000 kilometers. A range of 1,000,000 kilometers was more than enough in the two-world mountains. He could investigate the surrounding situations beforehand and discover any dangers. It's because of the gray mist. Who knows where the mist comes from? You can't actually disperse it. It looks like the mist is anything but ordinary. Jian Chen discovered the reason for his suppressed senses of the soul very soon. He did not devote too much attention to the mist. Instead, he began to observe the life-devouring beasts. The senses of his soul had already reached 1,000,000 kilometers away. However, he had no idea how vast the mountains were, as he still could not find the boundary. However, many life-devouring beasts appeared in the senses of his soul. The life-devouring beasts varied in size and shape, appearing in all sorts of forms. Some looked like tigers or leopards, while others seemed like ancient beasts. There were even some that existed as vegetation, fusing with the surroundings perfectly. As a result, it was difficult to discover them. However, no matter what form they took, the presence they gave off and the pulsing of energy was identical. There's a life-devouring beasts rapidly approaching this place 20 kilometers away. 25 kilometers away, there's a life-devouring beast in the shape of a huge tree, several hundred meters in height. Jian Chun found everything with the senses of his soul. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.